I wasn't paying
Take a
attention. And
But Meredith is
just
coming,
out
right?
of the corner of my eye,
No,
I saw
you're
your
doing
picture
it.
on the
That's
screen.
right.
I had to do a double take. It was like,
All right,
no,
dream
wait.
team, y'all
that's
ready?
J-
Y'all ready? Good?
Sorry.
Cool. No, you're fine. Good. Okay. I don't have to use the gavel, do I?
You can use the gavel if you'd like. It's your preference.
Well, it's my party. Okay. All right. I will now call to order. Oh, wait, do I have to give you a heads up? Are you ready? Are you rolling? Okay, well, let's do the thing. All right, I will now call to order the study session meeting of June 6th, 2022. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers, on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Here.
Councilmember Whitkovich.
Here.
Councilmember Hadamio.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Luke Massa will be absent. Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown will be absent. And Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joanna. First item on our agenda tonight, Northglenn City Hall project update, SD phase final update. Eric, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of City Council. Joey and Stefan from Anderson Masondale Architects are here this evening for their final touch base with you all during the schematic design phase. And I will point out that this will not be the last time you see them. Schematic design is merely just kind of the development of the design. They will go further in the next phase, which is called design development. And there'll be more touch points with council during that phase as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them, and they'll begin the discussion this evening.
Thanks, Eric. Good evening, Council. Joey Carrasquillo with Anderson Masondale Architects. To reiterate what Eric just said, we have a ways to go, and so this will not be the last time, but we are looking to complete schematic design effective on Wednesday of this week, which will involve a submittal to the city staff in the way of a report and a series of documents that will then also be subsequently shared with your CMGC on the project, which is FCI Constructors. And after Wednesday, we will be working closely with them over the coming weeks to test drive this concept against the dollars. So without further ado, I think we're just going to simply jump into it. This is the mission statement that we developed last year with your city staff. To this very day, I have not been asked to change it. So it remains the focus of what we're trying to accomplish here with our project. One of the opportunities that the new site has provided that we have spoken to you about in the past has been the idea that perhaps we can begin to think about how we're redefining E.B. Raines Memorial Park by bringing its western edge across Community Center Drive and doing that with our site. And as you know, we are also, with your support, focused on developing this project under the lens of the Living Building Challenge. And so what this plan is simply demonstrating is how we're going to embrace native landscape and xeriscaping as a way of articulating the foreground around all edges of the city hall. So everything that is depicted in the lighter yellowish greenish color to the east of the building is native prairie, primarily native prairie landscape, and everything that you see in the darker green is more of a xeriscape that has more varietals in the kind of plantings that we would do. And I'll just sit here for a second because the larger of the plans perhaps helps to articulate the diagram of the project, which is that we are endeavoring to keep the existing mature trees to the southwest of the site And we also want to develop a presence, a civic presence of your new city hall off of that intersection. So it quickly led us to thinking about a kind of diagonal treatment of how we begin to lay out the building. And then with that, an opportunity to think about how the city council chambers could begin to populate the northwest corner of the site and perhaps begin this conversation with the memorial across the ways. This is simply to show that during the schematic design process and working with city staff, we have kind of defined the scope of the city hall project in terms of what the development would be. And so it includes the building, it includes the development of the building and its site, some parking. What you see here is the footprint of the existing city hall. And what you probably will notice is that once the city hall is built, we have to take this down, which means that the parking in the middle of this plot cannot be put in place when we build the city hall. And so in working with your city staff, we've redefined the site of the project to include the extension and realignment of the roadway to the south so that we could add additional parking to that portion of the site, so that when we can bring the city hall online, that we can have roughly 75 to 80 spaces that are immediately available. And then that will allow for the demolition of the existing city hall, which will then trigger development of the parking that is intended to be the parking that would support your staff long-term. So I'll quickly go through a series of aerial views. So this is a view shed from the southeast showing the existing trees as best as we could model them digitally. We are looking at developing a service side of the building that would be predominantly for deliveries to the city hall. That is predominantly for your information technology department, who on a regular basis is getting a new technology for staff. And so they get lots of boxes from Dell and whomever else supports your operations. And our intent as we move into design development is to develop this within this landscape that we're developing and integrating to the site, so that to the eye, it's almost imperceptible that there's a series of ramps leading up to a back door to the building. The other thing that I should mention is that the site has roughly 14, 15 feet of grade change from the south to the north. And so how that is beginning to shape the direction for the building is that it is a two-story building, and the upper level of the building is more or less on par with the grading to the south. So it basically reads as a one-story building from the south. And then as the land begins to drop, as it moves to the south, the building kind of begins to grow. I should also mention that during the schematic design process, there was always a sense, based on how original planning was playing out, that the building was going to be a three-story building. We were able to finesse the footprint in a way by giving it a little bit of girth and making it a little bit shorter. And so we are now a two-story building, and what that affords us to do is perhaps explore the idea of developing a more gracious floor height at level 1 to support the community spaces down below. So when patrons come into the building, that we are really celebrating the civic quality of this building. This image is also showing you the beginnings of us needing to think about the PVs that we're going to need to provide for this project in order to hit our net zero targets for the building. Suffice to say, I think right now we're a little short, but we'll need to test drive that a little bit more. So, moving further to the north, so now we're aligned with Memorial Parkway, and we begin to see the building developing a kind of prow at the intersection. So I dare say that nobody will miss this building when they're coming down south on Community Center Drive. We also begin to see how the native landscape begins to transition into more of a kind of hardscape plaza environment that is intended to work in tandem with what's already set up across the ways with the memorial. These are some shots of the model. Hopefully we can get through this presentation quick enough, and if you are all interested in coming down to have a conversation in front of the models, this larger model actually comes apart, so we can kind of show you the insides of it a little bit. So really quickly, just to walk you through the plan organization. So at the ground level, to the south, we have all of our back of house functions. So we have a series of all of the rooms that none of you will ever walk into, hopefully. They're the lungs of the building. Adjacent to that, to the north is, the north arrow is actually not correct here, forgive us for that, but north is actually to the right. So this is all of the file storage that we have developed for the building. And it resides next to the two departments that will be leveraging that storage, which is the city clerk's office and then the finance office. And then this here is the vertical circulation that is in the middle of the building. And so entry can take place from the west off of the parking. It can take place off of the north from Memorial Parkway. And we can also capture patrons who are coming from the east, but they all end up here at the center of the building so that they can be greeted. And then we have two community meeting room spaces that are positioned along Community Center Drive, and then the council chambers that is oriented toward the memorial and toward the festival lawn. And we can talk more about these in detail perhaps when we get into the model, because it'll be a lot clearer to see. When we move up to level 2, organization has the city manager's office, economic development, straddling the western edge of the northern wing of the building. We have communications, and so the development of where people or where departments reside was really a function of us understanding through the programming and SD phase on what are the relationships that tend to trigger the adjacencies that need to take place. So we have city manager, economic development, communications at one end. We have the planning department, your third-party life safety inspectors positioned together to the south, along with Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and the Information Technology Department, which occupies this middle sector of this wing. And then Human Resources have their own suite, and that's simply our take on some of the sensitive matters that they address. We tend to think that Human Resources is perhaps a scenario where people want to be discreet about going into that department, and so we've kind of given them their own haven, within the building. And then these darker yellow moments that you see kind of working their way through the building along that diagonal are a series of shared spaces that are essentially meeting, conferencing, huddle spaces, and they all, they're all of varied size, with the intent of supporting the various activities that take place in the building. Some of them are positioned off of the primary vertical circulation, so the ones in the middle tend to be the ones that perhaps involve city staff meeting with public personnel. So we don't bring the public deep into the suites. We meet with them within the heart of the building. We have a series of additional support spaces or meeting spaces here, and then at the prow is what we call the working lounge, and it's intended to be an environment that can serve as a break room for some, can work as a space for somebody. It's basically Starbucks. It's where staff can actually build camaraderie. So here's a view of the building from the memorial. We are exploring from a material perspective. We hope to deliver a building that's a 100-year building for the city. But we also, and we recognizing that it's a civic building, we don't want to make it overtly civic. We want to get to that place where it fits what Northglenn is. And so there's a kind of modesty to it as well. What we are looking at materially is natural materials. We're looking at zinc metal paneling for the upper piece of the building. A little bit about zinc. All of the roofs in Paris are clad in zinc. It's a malleable material. It is a 100-year material, very natural material. It's a very clean material, very generous to the environment in terms of how it's made, how it processes water that falls on it and disseminates. And it has a really beautiful soft texture, and we have some images to show you what that looks like. And then we would like to counterpoint that zinc at the lower level with the community spaces with wood. Now, we know that wood in Colorado sometimes don't mix. And so what we're looking at are new products that exist today. It's effectively a thermally modified wood. So it's wood that is baked to like 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit to extract moisture out of it. And it's intended to effectively stabilize it. Some would say we are literally killing the wood. But the intent is that it will stand the test of time from a maintenance perspective. So here's a view from E.B. Raines Park, looking across Community Center Drive at the northeast corner of the building. You can see how the community rooms down below are clad in this thermally modified wood. The upper piece is in zinc. We have this is effectively a mechanical screen because we do have some mechanical equipment that we need to park up on the roof. And so we've developed a kind of well to provide a space for that, for those units without making them present. So here's some images of buildings that have been clad with these materials that we've shown you. And this image in particular, I find very interesting because you can see how the material, the zinc material, is both velvety and has a little bit of sheen. And that's all about how the sun hits it and how the material patinas over time. It is a very malleable material. So as we think about some of these moments in the building where we have these curved corners, that material will work its way around that fairly easily. The wood will also patina. So I point you to these images in particular, which is the same building taken over the span of 5 years. And the wood will patina as well. But I like to say that human beings patina as well. And so perhaps there's room for us to embrace that. This is a view of the City Hall from the west. So you would be coming from the future parking, leading toward the entry to the west. The ribbon windows, I guess, that we are reflecting, that is just a kind of a continuous strip, plays with the nature of the building. The building has this kind of ribbon quality to it. And so there's no reason why the windows wouldn't move along in that same fashion. It also provides a little bit of flexibility over time. If offices get remodeled, the ribbon windows are perhaps the best way to reconcile how offices can ultimately get a window along that strip. So some shots of the model. Then we'll get into some interior shots. So this is a This is a view of the lobby space coming in from the north entry, as if you were coming from the memorial into the city hall. And what you see is a lot of wood. So one of the other things that we are exploring currently with the building is deploying cross-laminated timber as a structural system for the building. So it's a relatively new market in architecture in terms of us developing buildings out of wood. It's going to support our agenda with the Living Building Challenge in terms of minimizing our carbon situation in terms of what we're deploying. It potentially offers us an opportunity in expediting schedule for the building. What we need to explore is whether those savings in schedule, as well as in interior finishes, because essentially it's a structural system that is, let me go to the next slide here. It's a structural system that essentially is just a series of planks that you're just laying down on a frame. And so all of this stuff gets prefabricated somewhere else, and then it just gets shipped to the site, and your building could potentially, a building of this size could potentially be put up, within 2 months, as opposed to a structural steel frame or a concrete frame that would take 10 times as long to do. And so the disadvantage is that it's a relatively new deployment of a structural system, and so what that means is that there's very little folks out there who actually do it, which means that there's cost associated with it. But that's changing. We now have folks in Durango who are actually developing this technology here in state, and so we've been having some conversations with them about the potentials of how they might be able to engage this project. But we also have folks, our neighbors in the Pacific Northwest have a lot of folks who can assist us with this as well. So it's an exploration right now that we're test driving, but I think it's fair to say that you can see the merits of deploying this. Not only does it have a kind of efficiency to it, but it has an incredible beauty to it as well. Right, the carbon issues. So here's a image of, well, so we're walking further, deeper into the into the lobby space from that north entry, and this is the central stair and elevator that get you up to level 2. And I guess we like to think about stairs as being an experience in and of itself, and so and we also like to encourage people to use stairs, and so the stair begins to take on the kind of quality that the building has embraced in terms of being ribbon-like, and it becomes a little bit of a journey to get there. So. And then here's a view coming from what I believe is the eastern entry of the building. So you're looking at the same lobby space from a different vantage point. You're now looking toward the northeast. And this is one of the community spaces down below, and you can begin to see how it starts to work its way up onto level 2, and there's an opening here that begins to interconnect levels 1 and levels 2. And then you're now up on level 2, looking down into that aperture that I just described. And, the community space down below has grown into this form up on level 2 that has a series of conferencing and huddle spaces that support the city staff. In many ways, this environment is kind of like a loft environment to the public space down below. And then this is an image of that lounge area, that prow to that's at the northeast portion of the building, that is intended to be a place to build community and camaraderie among city staff. This is not a place for the public. This is a place for your staff and for the council to come. There happens to be a stair right there that allows the city council to come here, so. And then, of course, from this space, the views are to everywhere, to Long's Peak, to Festival Lawn, to the Memorial, to E.B. Raines Park. And I think maybe even to maybe a glimpse of Pikes Peak, but we have to test that, drive that a little bit. So. And then finally, this is an aerial looking from the north. And so you can see the relationship that we think is really critical in building with the existing memorial. And then to that end, to talk a little bit about the council chambers, I think that relationship is important. And I think the memorial is about respect. And I think that's the kind of behavior that you expect in a city council chambers. And so we have more exploration to do, but we very much want this new council chambers to be a special place to really celebrate government with your community. And so the council chambers now has a kind of back of house. So the intent or the thought is that many of your patrons who are now coming to a city council chambers, perhaps over time, will learn to come from the north because we're developing a wonderful outdoor foyer for folks to engage before they come into the building. So we think about this outdoor space as a collector, as a gathering space, then bringing folks down into the chamber, and what that involves is roughly a 12-inch drop for the public to allow the council to be roughly 12 inches. I think right now you're at 2018 or so. And I know that when we were doing some of the tours of some of the facilities, we heard commentary that even this felt a little too high. So we dropped it 6 inches. And we're not done yet if we need to drop it more. So, but the thought is that if we can over time work the behavior of the public to come in this way, that it would allow for the council members to perhaps park to the west and enter this way, so that you can enter your back of house chambers. And so this is an executive session conferencing space with your own unisex restroom facility that then provides you access to the dice. And then just an idea that perhaps the dice can begin to work its way to provide a space. We usually come to these meetings and the directors are sitting in the back. So we simply did this drawing to suggest that perhaps the directors can be part of the conversation. And then wrapping around on the other side, where city manager, city clerk, council could perhaps sit. So, I mean, this is still a work in progress, but it's simply an idea that perhaps we can get everybody congregated. And then perhaps the speaker, I guess the intent with all of this is that through procession, through view shed from where the council sits, from how a person walks to where I'm standing today, that there's always a moment where the memorial reminds you about the respect that you have to have when you're in this space. So I think this is the view shed from where you're sitting right now, looking out. We're still working on the geometry and the dimensions of this window that we're showing to the back, because we both want to get the view of the memorial, but we also want to make sure that when people are parking, that the headlights aren't beaming in your eyes, right? And then we also are mindful of the security that I think all of you would like to have when you're sitting where you are right now. And so the dimensions of that window will be dictated by all of those issues, and we'll be looking at that further. But the room is organized in a way that we can also allow for, while you all have monitors in front of you, and you will have that in the new city hall, that we have strategic points for every participant in the room to be able to see the content that's being shown. And this is a view from the back of the chambers looking toward the dais. So it seems a little distorted, Stefan, I don't know why, but it's because we're. You're really tall. It's because you're really tall. You're a giant.
I took the picture, so.
And so we haven't worked out all the details, but the videographer would reside behind this wall, so there'll probably be a window that will be developing so that they will no longer necessarily be in the corner of the room, but will have their own space, and they'll have equipment that they won't ever have to move out in order to do the recordings. So that's our presentation.
Excellent.
So Julia, I just wanted to really quick, because unless I missed it myself, the other thing about the revised site plan is that we are providing the same amount of parking day of opening that we have today. So that we are not, that was part of the strategic aspect of that long little leg that you saw added, was to make sure that we had enough parking to be the equivalent of what we have right now, so that it'll be a seamless transition day of opening.
Great. Well, it looks like we have a couple of questions here, so I'm going to start with Councilmember Kondo.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. So you mentioned this construction is fairly new, and I'm just curious, what is the oldest building that is standing right now that's been using it? Any idea?
The oldest building. Doesn't reside in Colorado.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's new, of course, is the decking, right?
Okay.
The CLT deck is the cross-laminated decking. The wood columns and wood beams, there are examples of buildings that are hundreds of years old, the wood columns and beams.
Right,
So-
all of downtown
Okay.
Denver
Right.
is
So
a
we're
frame.
really talking about the flooring and the decking?
That's
flooring.
right.
As opposed to the structural members?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And I asked Counselor to forgive me, but where do we have our EOC today? Where is that located, our Emergency Operations Center?
I'm going to let City Manager Guyer answer that.
Great question, Councilmember Kondo. So we don't, the EOC would typically be stood up in the Justice Center because if we were responding to some type of natural disaster, less the building still standing, it would be in the community room or some other area back of house within the Justice Center.
Okay. And the reason why I asked this question is, you know, obviously this is an opportunity where we're building a new space, and I don't know if it's intended for perhaps one of the multi-use rooms there, say the one that is just right on the east side facing EB Rands. I don't know if that can be designed with the thought of having false flooring and the kind of conduit and IT connections and things like that, so that if you needed a backup EOC, you can kind of stand that up in short order.
Yeah, we hadn't thought of that. It's a great idea. So that's something we could evaluate. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm just giving my emergency planning
Yeah.
perspective. I thought maybe that would
Appreciate
be
it.
nice to add.
I would say that we'd like to know more about whether we want to do that or not sooner than later, so.
Yes. And I might be the good ideas guy showing up late, but I figured I'd air that concern. Thank you.
Of course. Councilmember Goff?
Right, the one question I had to do with the outdoor, or exterior, I guess I should say, wood that you're talking about. Is that, or yeah, I guess it includes the zinc too. What, fire resistant? Are we taking that into concern at all? I mean, you know, we're not like in the foothills, but you never know these days about fire.
Yeah, the resistance, the zinc won't burn. The wood, because it's thermally treated, won't burn as fast, but it's wood,
Okay,
so.
yeah, it just, was curious.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we are exploring with the wood is we're also trying to be strategic about we're trying to be strategic of not bringing folks close to the wood. So part of the landscape strategy is to develop significant foreground to keep folks away from being able to touch the surface, so.
So as you said that, I'm starting to think, what about like, correcting a graffiti, scratching into it or something? I mean, how does this compare? Is that part of something we're going to consider? What do you think about?
So those are conversations that we'll be having with staff to better understand. I mean,
I love the idea of wood,
Yeah.
but it is a little, maybe, not fragile, but I mean, it can be altered more easily than maybe some other.
Mhm.
And just overall, this is great, I love this.
Go ahead.
Comment on that. I think that those are challenges that aren't top of mind for us as well, but I think one of the things that you can see, and I think this image explains it very well, is there's 3 community rooms, and each of those are these objects, and there's transparency between them. So it's almost, when you enter the site, you navigate around these things with the landscape in front of you. So if we can get people within the building, then they approach the wood. But the idea is from the outside, you see it at arm's distance, and the path and the site funnels you into these public spaces. So very similar to the overall concept, where the park is coming into the building. The same is true of the cladding and the material and your overall experience. So that doesn't answer your question from durability, but it certainly, I think from a high level perspective is sort of, we're balancing those two. And now we're at the stage where it becomes reality, and all those questions are really valid.
Right. No, it looks lovely.
Awesome. All right, before Councilmember Kondo, I see your hands up again. I just want to quickly check with other council members. You all want to weigh in? Do you have questions? Okay, Ashley, Jay, good?
No questions. I think it looks great.
Okay.
Yeah, no questions. I love the design. It does have that wow factor we talked about. I like the sculptural look of it. Like you said, the flowing ribbon. And just the space that we have utilizing all the existing natural factors like the hill and the grove that you mentioned, and all the mountains and the park. Everything is getting featured too with the windows. I think that's very thoughtful. I like the design. It does look like something that, that's looking like even like the stadiums that they're making these days. That's what kind of reminded me of the contemporary football stadiums we see nowadays. It has that look, which I was getting at with the zinc metal. Kind of looks like what LA has for their SoFi Stadium, and the roundness kind of looks like the Raiders one, the Raiders Stadium. I'm just getting the vibes as like the architecture, but I think that's cool because it looks like contemporary stadiums now. I think it's kind of really interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
As
we frame it as being forward-looking, right? I mean, I think that's what Northglenn is really striving
Yeah.
to be, right? So,
So I also really like the look and the feel. I think I think the way that the design has been created is a really nice nod to Northglenn's sort of mid-century modern roots. It's very contemporary and modern looking, so it's beautiful. Thank you.
thank you.
The question that I have is around the council chambers. I think in one of the designs, you might have to help me make sure that this is correct. It's on page 10 or slide 10. But I'm trying to envision, oh, yeah, I'll give you a moment. Yep, go
Oh,
back.
I'm going back,
Yep.
okay.
So if you zoom in towards where the council chambers is, it looks like there's a door on the side that perhaps leads outdoors. Is that actually a
Out
door,
here?
or is that like some sort of window? Yeah,
This guy here?
yeah.
Yeah, it changes every time we redraw the plan. It's a reminder for us that there are further conversations regarding your path of travel if there's an event that takes place.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that we flagged that because that's certainly been a conversation that we've had as council.
Yeah.
In that we need multiple ways to enter and exit your
Right.
space. So, okay,
Yeah.
great. As long as that's still on your list to
Yes,
continue
we need
working
to solve
through.
that problem.
Okay.
And so right now, we have simply placed a door there. Right now, it just leads you into a water quality pond, so
Okay.
you're gonna have to swim.
Well, I mean, anything is possible, right? Really embracing our native roots here. Okay, excellent. And then the question that I had, Brooke, about parking was for you. So thinking about the number of spots that we have right now, do we regularly fill all of our parking spots? And do we need to make sure that we're maintaining the same number of spots?
We don't have to, but I think with the feedback that we've heard from staff, and the overarching concerns about the rec center being underparked, we were trying to address that concern by preserving the amount that we have now for day of opening. With the future phase of the city hall, the current city hall site will accommodate, I believe we have 78. Is that right, in the order of magnitude? Right now? For the, yes, 78 additional spaces on top of the spaces we're talking about now. So that's a future phase after the demo of this building.
Okay, got it. So that can be reevaluated. And in
Correct.
the event that we don't need all of that parking space, perhaps we can convert it to like a natural space.
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, that's great. Thank you for answering those questions. Councilmember Kondo, we're going to go back to you.
Thank you, Pro Tem, Mayor. And so I did want to follow up with my last statement. Now that I'm able to zoom in here. So I think maybe the community room that you have there could potentially be a backup EOC space. So I'd ask for some consideration.
Either this one
thought
or
about
even
that.
this one. There's two community rooms to
The one on the left-hand side.
this guy here.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Follow-up question, this is more in terms of, in the interest of being environmentally friendly. I wonder, and I was actually inspired by the water plant treatment tour that both Jay and I took earlier actually Thursday last week. Is there a design to collect the roof water, rainwater, and that sort of stuff to be able
Yeah.
to help irrigate the
Yeah.
landscape around the building?
Yes, I mean, it's actually a big endeavor, and working with city staff. We are currently looking at, is it 3 5,000-gallon cisterns? It's part of this Living Building Challenge agenda that we've embraced for this. And so we are looking to collect site water to be able to irrigate this natural native landscape.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. And Stefan, maybe you can add some more.
If I could add a little bit to that, it is one of the requirements of this Living Building Challenge system is you cannot use potable water to irrigate.
Okay.
And which is a big deal in Colorado. Our water laws traditionally have not allowed for that. And so you really have to be an entity like Northglenn is, which is its own water utility and has its own water rights. There is a path forward to be able to do that. That said, we still need to do some homework and make sure that that's the exact amount of water that we have, whether it's 15 gallons, 15,000 gallons, 20,000 gallons. We're not quite sure just yet, but we need to figure that out. And then the second thing we need to figure out is if what happens when we don't get a month of rain, which happens in Colorado and will happen. So that's the other piece that we're also doing research and looking at. But there's a couple paths forward, and we haven't hit a brick wall yet, and so that's really encouraging. So.
Great. I was surprised. I didn't know we have an arboretum over at our wastewater treatment plant. So some of the effluent is being used to grow our trees and things like that. So I'm glad that we're thinking about that also with this new building.
Okay, any other questions, comments? City Manager
Mayor
Guyer?
Pro Tem and Council, I just wanted to add a little bit more context going back to the question you had asked Mayor Pro Tem about the door behind the dais. So part of the process will include engaging chief, and he has several officers who are certified in SEPTED, just crime prevention through environmental design. Sorry, just totally butchered that acronym. It's similar to the process that we're doing with Croak Reservoir and EB Rains, but those spaces are built, so we're doing it after the fact. So throughout this process, and certainly as we dive into design development, you'll hear more detail and the thinking around what that looks like.
Great, thank you so much. All right, any other questions, comments from council? Okay, seeing none, thank you for being here with us and for sharing this design. We're definitely excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
All right.
We'll see you in design development.
All right, we look forward to it. All right, did council want to take a moment and take a look at any of the dioramas or designs down here?
The roofs come off.
Yeah. that's-
Oh,
I wanna
okay.
see that.
Well, why don't we give
they
ourselves
took the time
about
to
5
set it up.
minutes to take a look and ask any questions down here on the floor?
I'm assuming we'll still want the microphone.
Yes.
Folks.
Yeah, is it on, Stefan?
Is it on? Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. I think one of the we can just start peeling off the layers. But I think Joey had mentioned this when being able to get down to 2 stories versus 3, the building did get wider, and I think one of the drivers. There were a few drivers, but in terms of being able to provide more roof area, it gets us closer to the PV we know we're gonna need. And Joey had mentioned it. We still think we might be a little under, but when you take off this mechanical well, one of the things that's not shown but is shown in the 3D aerials we had before is a big skylight that occurs right over that stair. And so a big skylight will fill this space and that ribbon window, as Joey described and you saw in the renderings, with light. And so then both this portion right here and there may be potential to get some daylight into here, but you can see the building itself rises. There's a step in the building and a ramp. It's not modeled exactly correctly, but you can see this plus 2'6". So that's where we're trying to get more floor-to-floor height in the community rooms on this side of the building. And additionally, the roof line itself rises, and so then by the time you get to this workplace lounge, that's the views that you have to the west and over EB Rains Park. So this space is partially modeled just to give everyone a sense, but this large conference room is big enough to house 22, 23 plus people. And so in any meeting bigger than that, you'd probably go to the community room. But it will allow a significant portion of the city staff to meet, allowing special executive sessions to meet amongst you all. And so this form itself tracks all the way down. So when you're looking from the site, you'll see this large expansive window, and you'll see the wood tracking up through the entire building, and hopefully the idea of the park coming up and rising up through the building is expressed.
Now, if someone was having a meeting in here, it seems pretty open. I mean, I don't know, is that staff, is that something that's
Well,
usable or?
these will have guardrails, and so this is set back, and it's kind of this secondary moment of circulation. So, yeah.
Not everything is modeled.
Yeah.
So the conference room actually would be contained.
Yeah.
Like this is representing a glass wall.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
We just didn't model it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's right. Glass is open.
Yeah.
Right now, in this study version of the model.
And that second level, Stefan, just while you're here, again, security in mind, that whole other floor will have secured door access.
Yeah, there'll be
So it's not gonna be
storefronts.
free flowing in terms of
Right.
anybody can just wander up.
Yeah.
So when you rise up, you can see in the plan there's that door, and so you really are contained from a public standpoint to this grand lobby and then this stair, and beyond that you need to be let into the space, and then which is why this conference room, and you can't quite see it unless you're down low, but there's another conference room for the planning department there. So there are 2 we're calling that the business partner workspace, where a lot of the economic development meetings will happen. And then another large conference room for large planning meetings to occur with developers or whoever might be engaging the planning department.
Cutouts on the EB rain side, is that window or is that just cutouts so you can see inside the community rooms?
Which one specifically are you?
On the bottom.
Both.
Right.
Those will be, I mean, that's transparency that's afforded to those rooms. And it also happens to be, we didn't really talk much about this, but as part of the landscape development, there are some hardscape moments that will be made accessible from those rooms, so you can have activities still out.
Also,
Like patio
will be an access.
Yeah,
slide.
there'll be access.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we are looking at ways that, whether it's a big double door or whether it's a stacking window and you can open up a big expanse of that. I think in a lot of the precedent city halls, one in particular opened up, community rooms opened up to a garden-like space, and that's the intent.
Any other topics?
Yeah, so.
In June.
So as we go down a level, you can see the 3 entries that are described and the congregating moment. The dashed lines on the floor there, that's just the lines above, so you can kind of see the relationship of the big volume of space. The customer service transaction desk. This is reserved for, if it's feasible or achievable, ambassador's reception standpoint with eyes all the way through the lobby, through to all the various entry points. The transaction waiting area for the clerks is quite generous. We know there's a lot of people, sometimes you'll have to serve multiple people at a time, filling out of forms. I know the passport offerings that office provides is really a wonderful service and valuable and brings in revenue.
And, really with the intent with trying to develop that extended height at the lower level is that we really are trying to bring that outdoor environment. Right. It's almost as if the park is coming into the building, so that when you're in the building, you don't ever lose your bearings, right? It's like you're in the park, it's just immediately in the building.
White spaces there on the south side, that would be for utilities?
It starts with storage.
Computer server farm? Or
That's right. Yeah, it's the lungs and the heart.
Mechanical.
Mechanical.
Joey, did you touch on the landscape piece that we had talked about at our last meeting? Like what we do over here and what
Remind me what we talked about.
You talked about, given that we're gonna be changing, we have a lot of turf
Oh,
on
yeah.
this side, so to carry that, the pedal concept over, that we may have, will we have an opportunity potentially to put out along this side, so yes, we figured out what it is to the zero-scaping design that is around the building carries through somehow along the, so there's more continuity
Yeah.
between what they're doing with.
And it's also a good example for our residents.
So less grass.
Great.
Or more plants to take care of. City council chambers something up too.
I suppose it can.
I think so.
Don't make it, it's okay, don't worry.
We didn't spend a lot of time.
It's okay. Really don't have to
It's a TBD.
Yeah, it's like, believe us, it's here.
It's
Gonna look a little flat.
Yeah, right. It is.
I just wanna know where the pond is for when.
Coming out here.
Oh, yeah, okay. Jenny Lake.
I really like this circular. City council and supporting staff.
I like the White House.
And you can, these are 1-foot contours where you're gonna be about 2 feet plus lower. And then, so that's why what Joey was talking about, the sill of this height, if if it's more at a 4-foot height, 5-foot height, enough for occupying the dais, you see out, you have a wonderful view, but you're not going to get people coming in and staring at and two, just really, yeah, from a comfort, security, and physical security, which we're going to review extensively. But yeah, it is an interesting design exercise in that we asked ourselves, how does everyone have an orientation to the memorial? Right? And of course,
It's hard to do.
it's hard to do because everybody also wants to look at one another, right? So I think that's why one of the things that has come up is, we do know the desire and just the functionality of the dais being fixed, but then these places around that complete the circle can be mounted, right? And you can set those up as there's going to be components just like here that need to be fairly fixed, in that the city manager and clerk and attorney will need places to sit, but it would be wonderful, right? If sort of the decision makers were all around this sort of round table, all oriented in some ways back to the memorial. Good. The executive session room, I think, we're still working on sizing, but we're trying to make sure there's 11 or 12 around the table, and then room for another 5 or 6 size. So the executive session room will be generous enough, of course, for all the mayor and council, and for other executive session members to partake.
Great.
And a snack.
Surgery and a coat closet and your mailboxes and your own restroom.
We'll add that to discuss, so we can show better technology.
Anything else you want to point out, council, any more questions?
Exciting.
Yeah. Thank you all. This is amazing. Really cool.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Of course, and thanks for letting out. Thanks for taking it all.
Do you have to fill it with water or just plug into water?
Do you want me to pour you some?
Yeah. Starting next one is 6, Eric.
So just go ahead and.
You got it.
You send it back up.
No.
You what?
It is. Okay, we'll give them just a minute to move things and we'll go ahead and get started again.
I'm gonna try something. I need this thing is so narrow.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Yeah.
Okay, are we all back?
2 days. Which is a lot.
It's cool. Kind of like the flow of it. Got like that Guggenheim look. See a little.
It's interesting. It does look like the good.
But I really like it. Like
Yeah.
when you see it in a model like that. Yeah, I do.
Exactly.
All right. Becky, are you filling in for Sarah? Okay.
Is that like putting on their decks?
Yeah. It's kind of.
All right, let's go ahead and get started again. So the next item on our agenda is a comprehensive plan update. Becky Smith, Planning Manager, will present the update to council.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Wilford, Council. Becky Smith, Planning Manager, here tonight presenting on behalf of Sarah Dusenberry, who for circumstances out of her control could not be here tonight. So I'm going to do my best to present this content as well as she would have for you guys. So really the purpose of the meeting tonight is just to provide an update on the community engagement efforts with the comprehensive planning process as well as solicit feedback on the goals and policy recommendations that are being considered by the resident task force for the areas of land use and water resources. This is just an overview or an agenda of what the discussion is tonight, so I won't go through this line by line. We'll get to all of it. A comprehensive plan overview. I know a lot of you are familiar with this just because we kicked off this plan. Well, we tried to kick it off before COVID, got delayed, kicked it off again. But a comprehensive plan is basically municipalities and counties are authorized to prepare comprehensive plans as a long-range guiding document for a community to achieve its vision and goals. The comprehensive plan provides the policy framework for regulatory tools like zoning, subdivision regulations, and other policies. A comprehensive plan promotes the community's vision, goals, objectives, policies, and establishes a process for orderly growth and development, addresses both current and long-term needs, and provides for a balance between the natural and built environment. Comprehensive plans are typically very long-range documents. A lot of them are a 20-year horizon. When we met with council initially, we decided to look at a 20-year horizon for this plan. They're typically updated fairly regularly. A lot of communities will update them every 5 years. We're more on a 10-year cycle due to the delay. We're kind of more at 12, 13, but that's okay. One of the things that we heard loud and clear when we first started this process was that we want a lot of community feedback and engagement so that we're sure that the vision we're establishing for our future is in line with what our residents really want. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is by forming a resident task force. They're the primary driver of this plan, so they're meeting monthly to look at all of the aspects of this comprehensive plan, all of the different chapters and considerations, and making recommendations that we're bringing to the Planning Commission as well as to you guys to give them feedback as well. They're bringing in experts to talk about certain aspects of this plan. So we've met with water resources, we've met with public works engineering, because we want to make sure that as we're providing recommendations in this plan, they're rooted in reality and things that can happen in our future. We did start with 20 applicants for the task force. 6 chose not to join, and then we did have 2 drop off, so we have 12 active members currently. And to get the task force, we did send out a mailer to all of our residents, so everybody knew that this was happening. Another way that we're working to get community engagement is where we formed a group called the Neighborhood Champions. And this is a group that's working outside of the city efforts. So these are people that are in their community, they're building trust with their neighbors and organizations that they're affiliated with, and they're really representatives for their neighborhoods. They're responsible for informing residents, collecting feedback from residents, and giving that feedback back to staff. So staff isn't necessarily participating with them through this process, but we're helping support them by helping them formalize their plans to engage their neighbors. We have a few that are doing block parties this summer to get feedback from residents. We have one that's door knocking and handing out fresh produce from their garden. One is on the Citizens Advisory Board and also doing coffee with neighbors and meeting with faith-based organizations. And so since these neighborhood champions are really working outside of city functions and they're being asked to do more than just attend a meeting, we are compensating them with Visa gift cards at the end. Oh, that's a repeat slide. Public engagement. So to date, we've attended 7 events that were hosted by the city. So that means we just set up a booth and tried to engage people where they're at. We know that our events are well attended, and so we tried to focus on the events that we know are attracting mostly our residents versus the regional events. We also had 2 comp plan specific events of the kickoff, as well as we met residents at Waiko Park and Larson Park and provided coupons to an ice cream truck that we had there. That was met with, I would say, medium success. Larson was definitely more successful than Waiko, but we have to try things to see if they work or not. So We also have been to several city meetings, so we've met with different boards and committees to talk about the plan, as well as just our regular meetings with the champions. We've had one focus group for persons with, that are living with disabilities, and got a lot of feedback from them as well that we're trying to integrate into this plan. We have a website that is on Social Pinpoint, so I definitely, if you haven't checked it out, it provides updates, it has quizzes regularly, or surveys regularly, trying to, again, solicit that feedback as well as an interactive map. And we have been working with our communications department, which is awesome. They're really great at getting information out, to get social media posts as well as get the information out in the Northglenn Connection and postcards. Oop, I went the wrong way. Oh, no, that's right. Okay, so this is sort of the first touch point. The task force started this process by developing a vision statement, and they developed this vision statement based on the public input we received when we kicked off this plan. The vision statement is really a guidepost for this plan and represents the goal for what the city will look like if the plan recommendations are implemented. The Planning Commission has reviewed the vision statement and agreed with it. And I would say tonight is really a great opportunity for City Council to consider this vision statement and let us know if you have any feedback or changes you would like to see. I'm happy to read through the vision statement if you would like, or no? Okay. And so, as I mentioned before, a comprehensive plan does focus on several policy areas, but one of the big things that a comprehensive plan deals with is land use in the built environment. And so one of the first things the task force took on was looking at land use in our community and identifying areas of change. And so this is their top list of areas of change. It includes mostly commercial centers, but also some vacant properties within the city. And what they've done is listed it in the ranking of their priorities. So they think that the marketplace is the most important, and what they would like to see there is mixed-use regional. So my question now is everyone familiar with our mixed-use zoning purpose statements? Because I did bring them to read in case you would like a little background on what mixed-use regional is. Yeah.
I would
Okay.
appreciate the education.
So mixed-use regional is district is intended to accommodate areas of large-scale mixed-use development and redevelopment that is intended to serve the city and the region. The mixed-use district requires adequate automobile access and circulation while providing pedestrian-friendly development and good access to public amenities and public transportation. Uses in the mixed regional district are typically regional scale employment, commercial activities, and services with limited higher density residential uses. And so mixed-use regional was identified for the Marketplace Annex, as well as the Huron Center, which is just a little west of the Marketplace. I will say that when we met with the Planning Commission, they did, and also, sorry, O'Mara Ford was also identified as mixed-use regional as an area of potential change. When we met with the Planning Commission, they agreed with everything except for the Huron Center, and they felt like maybe that's more appropriate as mixed-use corridor. And so that is something to think about. Another thing I want to mention is that this is a guiding plan, and all of these properties are privately owned. And so this plan does provide guidance to the Planning Commission and City Council to approve an application for a zoning change if one should come forward, but it doesn't mean just because it's in the plan that it will change. So it's really one of our tools in the toolbox to guide development. It doesn't mean that it will happen. Some of the other big areas were 112th and Irma. And actually, I don't know if I can get this map open with this. Okay. I just want to show that one because they did initially just talk about 112th right by the transit station, but then the task force did decide to carry it down on the west side of Irma all the way to 104th as mixed-use corridor. Now, the Planning Commission did have a lot of discussion about that, and they don't necessarily agree that the whole run of Irma Drive should be mixed-use corridor. And so that is something I'm really interested to hear your feedback on tonight. One thing to consider as well is that a lot of those properties, again, are privately owned, and there's a lot of different property owners. So it would take a lot to see that kind of change there. And it's probably unlikely that someone that owns an industrial property that's highly valuable would want to rezone to mixed-use corridor.
Well, Brooke brings up this map. I see we've got a question from Councilmember Kondo.
Yeah.
Is it on this section?
No, I actually was going to make a comment on what was presented previously.
Okay, let's hold it till the end then.
It can wait.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Okay, so this is let's see if I can find oh, there we go. So this is the 112th, and this is actually also included in this plan in an area of interest for the Northglenn Urban Renewal Authority. And so there's synergy there for sure in looking at this area. It's the task force after their discussion that thought it would be a good idea to carry that use potentially all the way down Irma Drive. And I haven't read the purpose statement for mixed-use corridor, but it is a little different than regional, so I'll read that really quick. The mixed-use district is intended to accommodate mixed-use development with walkable, active streetscapes. Uses in the mixed-use corridor district are typically lighter intensity commercial with limited auto-oriented uses that are compatible with surrounding residential neighborhoods. Residential uses in the mixed corridor district are intended to offer a diversity of attached housing at varying densities. So mixed-use corridor is really going to be lower density residential, lighter commercial uses as well that are more intended to serve the residential areas around it. The other areas to note that are looked at for potential rezoning to mixed-use corridor is the Washington Center, which is up here, Washington Point and Washington Center. So that's these two locations, as well as the other area to note is that this property here on 112th that's currently vacant was discussed for public facility or mixed-use corridor, as well as it's a vacant space south of O'Mara Ford that is being looked at for potential rezoning to residential mixed-use or RM, which is a multifamily 1, so that's a medium-density multifamily. So with that, are there questions or comments on the list or the priorities at this time, or do you want to save them to the end?
It's up to you all.
Yeah, I have a few questions. Just some of the parts that you mentioned on the 112th and to 104th on Irma, are those including those old auto sales spot on 104th and just east of Irma? I know there was some talk of something going there, but I see that
So
not sure if it was
you're
included.
talking about right
Yeah,
here,
104th, yeah.
where
that old-
Charlie's Auto used to be?
Yeah,
So that's actually under redevelopment right now, and it's
Okay.
going to be a 7-Eleven.
okay, cool. And then the old U-Haul spot, and then that like dance studio on 112th and Irma?
So
Was that
right
included
here.
too? Okay,
So,
okay,
Just north of Mercedes.
right, mm-hmm. And then, let's see. And then 112th, Irma and York, that corner, 112th and York.
right here,
Mhm.
that is currently zoned mixed-use corridor. And we have a developer that's interested in doing a multifamily development there. They just have some real drainage issues on the site that they're trying to work out, and so they've been working on it for a very long time.
Okay, and I'm sure there's probably not too much you could do even north of the Moose, right? There's like nothing, it's nature area.
North of what?
Where the Moose Lodge,
Yeah,
That's
so that's
just-
all
yeah.
owned by the Moose Lodge,
Mhm.
actually, and it's zoned commercial.
Okay.
So they can do whatever they want as long as it fits within the commercial performance standards. The thing that's going to make that a challenge is that there is a setback. And since it turns into a little
Yeah,
triangle,
there's like
they're
no
not going to be able to
space.
really build much
Yeah.
and meet that setback requirement.
Okay.
Any other?
Yes, Councilmember Condo, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not, so going back to that sliver of land there, west of York, I'm just, it's so close to that rail intersection, and I know people don't necessarily like to live close to rail lines. Was that part of the discussion as to whether it would be prudent to put multifamily that
Yeah.
close to a rail line?
So we did a master plan.
You think it would be actually an attracting factor? Okay.
We
I'm sorry.
did, oh, that's okay. We did a 112th station master plan when we knew this station was coming. And that spot was actually identified as the best market potential for multifamily, with maybe the possibility of a little bit of commercial, but acknowledging that the commercial piece would be really challenging there. Multifamily and having residential density near a transit hub is actually really beneficial from just moving people around on alternative modes of transit.
But they turned down the rails, warning bells and stuff like that, right?
I have heard there are definitely complaints, but I don't know.
Testing is done.
Yeah. I
Okay.
remember the testing was just onerous and
They
really
recently
painful.
had to do additional testing at 100, and so there was a series of complaints in the last week or so.
Okay.
All right. So I'll move on to the actual policies and goals for land use, if I can. All right, so the first is to support effective development and redevelopment practices in areas of change, considering equity and environmental sustainability as a component of the recommendations. So this plan is identifying land uses at a very high level. It's not getting into the nitty-gritty of market conditions and capacity limitations, possible densities and opportunities for each site. And so part of the prioritization plan is to then provide a roadmap for the city to then do those sub-area or master plans that get into that kind of detail and can really be prescriptive for what that density should look like. Those sub-area plans are really helpful because they give the developer a good tool for what the city would accept there. And they also give us a really good understanding of what our limitations are based on our water resources, traffic, our streets, et cetera. The second policy and goals is around supporting the preservation of the existing character in identified areas of stability. And so think of the areas of stability as basically everything that wasn't highlighted on the map. People really love Northglenn, mostly the way it is. And so the recommendation here really aims to exemplify the characteristics important to the community, and predominantly is focused on areas that include established neighborhoods with a lower density feel, pedestrian-focused areas such as parks and trails, and commercial areas that accommodate the surrounding neighborhoods. So there was a lot of appreciation for the neighborhood Walmart, a lot of appreciation for the Webster Lake Promenade. And so those are areas that we wouldn't say that there won't be any change, but that when changes come in, we want to be very sensitive to the character that exists when those changes occur so that we're not altering that character. The next one is around encouraging redevelopment and development to create accessible and pedestrian-focused properties. And this policy really aims to make Northglenn friendly and equitable to all types of users. It's geared toward mostly towards commercial, public facility, and multifamily spaces, but really all focuses on universal design, making it accessible to all users. The next one is to strive for redevelopment practices that are environmentally sustainable. And the intent of this policy is really, and goals, is to ensure that Northglenn develops and redevelops in thoughtful ways that meet the needs of present and future generations without compromising the ecosystems that we depend on. And I think this is the last land use one. It's strengthen existing commercial areas and centers. And again, this policy focuses on making these spaces in Northglenn more user-friendly to the public. But by doing so, it promotes business centers that are more appealing to the customers, and also has goals as far as recommending incentives to help those businesses develop those centers in a way that is user-friendly.
So before we go to water, want to pause and let council sort of weigh in, because this part of the conversation is really to have you guys weigh in on these guiding principles. And as Becky had stated earlier, this is coming from the task force with the facilitation of the public input from all the public processes, as well as, you know, staff facilitating putting these together. But as we move forward with this process, this is what we intend to bring back as these principles for these chapters of the comprehensive plan. And so what we're really hoping to accomplish tonight is to have you guys weigh in and express support, concern, questions, clarifications, things of that nature with this part of the discussion tonight. And we wanted to create this space for you to be able to do that. So.
All right, Councilmember Goff?
All right, mine has to do with and it might even kind of bleed over into the water resource. But in the land use, talking about increasing green spaces, and I just, first of all, kind of wanted to know a little bit more about what was included in the definition of a green space, and then how are we balancing that with our need?
Which, sorry,
Oh, you know, I wrote it down, but I'm.
Principle 4?
is
I
it
think,
4?
Environmentally sustainable.
Yeah. It's on land use 3, number 3A, incentivize reductions in asphalt and increase green space.
Yes.
So I just. kind
So
of- that
green
was my-
spaces is not defined at this time, but I would say, based on the task force conversations, that green spaces is not referring to turf necessarily.
Okay.
It would just be spaces that aren't paved. So it could be any sort of plant material. There's a lot of research that around just mental health and having access to places that aren't paved and
I
concrete
totally agree with
and
all of
whatnot.
that. I was just kind of curious about the need for conserving water, but that answers the question. And it'd be like native plants or something.
And we could be more specific in that goal as well, to say, and this is not prescribing.
Maybe natural spaces or something.
Yeah.
If they're green.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. We can bring that back to the task force.
That was all I had.
Councilmember Walker, how are you feeling over there?
I think I need to know more information about what the task force wants to do with the 100, or rezoning Irma. And like I said, it's private property and we can't make them do anything.
Right.
I don't really see the need in rezoning that very profitable place for the city.
Yeah, and I would say that everything in this plan is not prescribing a rezone. It's if the owner wants to come in and make an application, then what we would do as staff, the zoning code says these criteria have to be met to support a rezone, and one of them is that it meets the intent of the comprehensive plan. And so we review the comprehensive plan in the areas of change to say this is consistent with what the city wants to see, or it's not. And that's how we make a decision if we want to support an application moving forward, and how we communicate to an applicant on staff support, and how we would present it to the Planning Commission and City Council. So we cannot force, well, I'm sure there's circumstances if we were to go through the process of condemning properties and whatnot, we could change the zoning, but we wouldn't do that just because it's in the comprehensive plan. It would really take the will of the private property owners. So I will say that at the Ward 1 meeting, when we had a tent there, most residents were kind of like, I don't really see this as a mixed-use corridor. From south of the commercial businesses on 112th, they were like, yeah, I see that. But when you start going south on Irma Drive, they were like, I don't see that. So I think it is something that we will be bringing back to the task force and asking them what they think based on the planning commission's concerns and the residents' concerns. And if city council has concerns, we would like to bring that back to them as well.
And I would just add that I think the way that this community and the councils, since I've been here, have been geared toward is how do you create a better, more vibrant community? In that when we look at these sub areas, is there a better, highest and best use than what's there today? And is this something that is palatable to the surrounding area as well as the community at large and to the city council? So what we do with this comprehensive plan is identify these areas, and then with the adoption of the plan, we have the ability to go out and further study them to really understand whether it has a fiscal and practical reality to it. And so this is not a community that literally looks to what I think what your concern might be is downzoning things and making things less productive than what they are now. It's more of, is there an opportunity to make this more a more productive property than what it is today?
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Council members on this side?
Yeah, I had the same concerns as you, Councilmember Walker, and that was very helpful. I appreciate that. I just wanted to mention that I really like 2B, work with the Northglenn Historic Preservation Commission to identify historically significant areas with potential for local designation, because that is a part of their strategic plan that they recently adopted. So I think that's great and really important. That's all I've got.
Councilmember Jaramillo, do you want to weigh in?
Um,
I fully recognize I'm forcing people to
Yeah.
talk right now, but just trying to make sure that staff gets the direction that they need on this important item.
Right, I'm just looking at like every little space that there is in the North Ward too, because like they're gonna be growing pretty soon. I'm just excited to see what's gonna be there, in the next few months and years, but I'm just thinking forward of, how can we activate some of these spaces that are by M&O that people can utilize when they are at the East Lake inline station. Just thinking about that, because I didn't realize we have property all the way up to East Lake Avenue. Like this, I can see little spaces, and I don't know. I started drawing a little map and stuff.
Is that something you would like the task force to look at as a potential area of change going north of Carl's Farm?
Well, I mean,
Or-
I'd like to keep some nature.
Okay.
I do like that. I think that's part of what that area of charm of it. I'm just, just looking at the map and thinking of what's there. So, but I do understand some of your concerns too about the zoning. But I'd like to know just I'm sure I just like to know more about what the real like I don't see really any issue with Irma Drive. I think it, like you said, does bring a ton of great small businesses that I've utilized in the past. But that's what's great about it too, is we do have that section that's more industrial, and I think that's something that we need as a thriving city. Yeah, so I'm gonna, since that was my little piece, I was just me thinking out loud. So
Great.
there's that.
That's what we're here to do. That's perfect. Councilmember Kondo?
First of all, I want to applaud you on developing some principles. I think principles are a nice way to, at a holistic sort of level, kind of guide where the city is going. And, but I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Walker's concerns that, this is, it sounds like, and let me just parrot this back, it's just a matter of principles, but they're not binding, if you will. It's not required.
That is correct.
So I know that there was a lot of engagement, and there will be more engagement with our residents. I just wonder if are we running this by some of the private property owners or people along Irma Drive?
So we have not yet. we certainly can talk about ways to do that. What I would like to do before we start talking to them is get direction on if it's even something that the city wants to see as a potential zone district on that area, because if it's not, I think it would be better not to start that conversation. Since zoning does get confusing for a lot of people, and we're not talking about zoning per se, we're talking about future land use potentials. So with that, I guess it would be good to get maybe a consensus, because I've heard some just, I don't see it, and of what you guys think of that section.
So I'll be fair in that I feel like it would probably be really helpful to have a study session where we are bringing some of our newer council members up to date on some of our land use policy, because, I mean, we've got many new council members that didn't have the benefit of going through the UDO rewrite. And so I think that, from my perspective, might be a really helpful place to start, in, especially in terms of helping folks really wrap their brain around what that could mean. The other thing I would really like to see is a matrix that identifies what these locations are currently zoned as, and then in comparison to what the recommendation is, so that we can really get a feel for where they are now and what their potential truly is. The other thing that I see here is that a lot of these different locations, I think there's a lot of good overlap with some of the areas that NURA is interested in. And so I think it's important to have them at the table and have their input on what some of these recommendations are. And then finally, just wanted to highlight that a lot of these areas on the list are entry points into our city. And so I think that that's something that we as a council should consider when we're thinking about the highest and best use of what these properties could look and feel like as people are entering our community. And so just some feedback in terms of potentially a next step. And because I don't know that I have an answer for you tonight.
And that's totally fine, because this is not going to wrap up until next year. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities to continue to talk about all of these potential land uses, and nothing that's talked about tonight will be set in stone, but it will be brought back to the task force as feedback from city council, so that they can keep tweaking their discussions and what they're looking at as far as their ultimate recommendation to the planning commission, who adopts the plan, and then city council, who ratifies the adoption of that plan.
Awesome. Go ahead, Brooke.
So a couple of other things for some of the newer council members that may not be as readily apparent about why we have a comprehensive plan is that when we look at land use decisions, like we have an upcoming rezone that's going to be presented to you, one of the things that we look at when we do rezones is it aligned with the comprehensive plan? And so it's a criteria that we use. It's a tool for you to be able to either say an easier way to say yes or an easier way to say no. So part of what this also represents is those areas of change are areas that are possibilities to look at something different. But there's a lot of areas that aren't identified as areas of change, which means if a developer comes in and goes, hey, I can buy this land really cheap, but I want to go put something that the community doesn't recognize, and then they come to the city council because they have the right to request that, you can use the comp plan as a tool to say, this isn't consistent with our vision of the community, therefore it's a basis to evaluate whether or not to approve the application or not. So it does, and this is a high-level conceptual document, but it can be used in both ways to either support change that can be embraced by the community, that this is a vetted process. And that's why when we talk about these areas of change and doing further study, it's to better understand, is there really community support for it? And is it really in the best interest? Do we have the infrastructure? All those other details that you don't really address at the comp plan, but we have that ability to go dive deeper and really foster that, so that if someone does come along, we have the information in front of us so you guys can make an informed decision.
All right. Did you have a question?
No, I'm
Okay.
trying to internalize all that, but I think
right.
that was a great explanation.
Great. Councilmember Goff?
Seems like we're focusing on that Irma Drive area kind of question. If you drop off that southern little strip, is the Banks building included in the development area at the top or not?
The which building?
It's that, it was Bank School Supply.
It's on the east side.
That's on the
It's on the east side.
Yeah.
It's empty.
It's on the east side.
Oh, so it's not on that?
I don't think so.
They were talking
I
about
thought-
west side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Well, then my only other question is, I was kind of trying to go through this again. Was there a reason given why the suggestion was to change this?
So I was at the beginning of the meeting and then I had to come to the city council meeting. So I've been trying to understand why they moved from just the section on 112th all the way down 104th. But I think from talking to Sarah, it sounds like the west side of 104th along Irma Drive is already a lighter intensity of industrial uses. A lot of them function more like commercial. And the mixed-use corridor would provide a transition from industrial to those residential neighbors that back up to the park. So I totally, from talking to her, understood that logic. In my professional opinion, I don't think it's ever gonna happen, even if we put it in the plan, but there's nothing that, if it's something that we could see as a vision and we think would be appropriate, that is a downside, even if it doesn't happen. It's not like things that don't happen in the comprehensive plan are a ding against us or whatnot. It's, as Brooke said, it's a tool for that change if the change presents itself.
Well, it does seem like it's more forward thinking to do that. I mean, doesn't mean anything would happen at all unless there's motivation from, property or some buyer.
And, property owner go, hey, retail commands a higher lease rate than industrial, in theory. And so, hey, that might be something I might be interested in.
Do you feel like you have the feedback that you need on this piece?
Yeah, I think it's something that I want to bring back to the task force and have more of a conversation and understand more of why they're including it, so that so they can decide if they really want to keep it in there and justify it, or if they would rather drop it and keep just the section on 112th, which does align with the Urban Renewal Authority, and if that aligns with what you guys see for 112th, we'll probably keep that there.
Okay, great. And then do you need consensus on the different principles that we're in agreement with those?
It would be great.
Okay, cool. Thumbs up, thumbs down, questions? Yeah? Okay, you've got full thumbs ups on that.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, of course. All right, Becky, I know you're gonna jump into water resources now.
And this should be pretty quick, I think. So as I said, we met with Water Resources, and Tammy Moon came and presented to us. And one of the areas that the task force really wants to promote within this plan is to develop, promote, and enhance responsible and efficient use of water resources. And this policy and goals really aim to support the expansion of water conservation education within our community and the existing programs that we already have. So working to expand them, as well as incentivizing measures on private properties that promote water conservation. So are there any questions about this one? Yes?
Okay, this has probably come up before, but I know just driving around in Ward 3 anyway, a lot of people are replacing their grass with rock and drought-resistant native plants. And I know we've had this conversation before about code, that depending on how you interpret it, a lot of these people are not in compliance. And that could include me. So I'm just wondering if that's something that's going to be part of the conversation and looking at this, as if we can reword the ordinances a little bit differently, or I
Yeah,
don't know.
absolutely. So if this, through this planning process, this should drive amendments to the land use ordinances. And so if seeing more xeriscape or changing how the wording is for compliance for xeriscaping, or how plants are measured and that 50%, then that should be included as a policy recommendation. And that's something that, if the city agrees with, could be implemented very soon after this plan is adopted.
Okay, right.
So if I could just add to that, if you have a hard time falling asleep sometime this week, I would recommend taking a look at the 2010 comp plan, because that's been this department's roadmap for implementing the changes that you've seen with the zoning code and doing these sub-area plans. And so largely what this is a catalyst for us to then go and say, okay, here's our directives under the comp plan to bring back to council, and we create deliverables out of these policy objectives and goals to bring back to you for consideration to say, this is how we're gonna go about executing. So just to put that kind of bigger picture is comp plan's that vision, the UDO is kind of how we deliver part of the comp plan, along with other pieces that are also part of the process. But just to keep in mind, that's one of the aspects of this layering that we do is we try to go and carry out what this vision is through those tools that we have, and those in times require amendments like what you're referring to.
And just clarification for me, you would want to see the code be more lenient on xeriscaping and plant materials in terms of how they're measured for that 50%. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm giving the task force the right.
Just, just driving here, I can point out a few yards where this last few months, they ripped out everything and it's all rock. And good or bad or whatever, but that's the kind of thing that
Okay.
we need some clarification on.
Yep. Got it. Oops. So the last one around water resources is maintain and improve water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. And this final policy recommendation that we have tonight to discuss really gets at the level of service and city operations, and it aims to make sure that the infrastructure continues to support existing and future generations. So any questions or comments on?
Councilmember Kondo?
Yeah, so again, I appreciate the fact that you're revamping or upgrading principles. I'll tell you that when Jay and I toured the water plant last Thursday, it was an eye-opener for me, just a little bit of perspective. I think the water plant processes 2 million gallons of water per day, clean water, in the winter. And in the summertime, that bumps up to about 7 or 8, refresh my memory, 7 or 8 million gallons per day. So that's a 4X increase. And as we're facing, potential drought or shortage of water in the west here, I really applaud what the staff is trying to do to lean into this problem. So thank you for doing that.
So if you haven't been to the wastewater treatment yet, that is also super fascinating.
The wastewater treatment tour was quite memorable.
Yes.
From an olfactory sensory standpoint. I don't know, Jay, did you really like that?
Yeah, it was definitely, you said sensory, everything was.
Yeah, it was a full sensory
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I didn't realize this, but our water treatment plant is all gravity fed, so there's very little electrical consumption in cleaning our water for drinking. But when we have to process our waste, it sucks up a lot of electrons, a lot of electricity. So, certainly, I think that's probably one of the things that we probably need to think about with regards to water resources is, can we be smarter about how we use the electricity to make the water, the effluent discharge, satisfactory. So that's one thing I would encourage. I know you're thinking about photovoltaics, power sources and stuff like that over there, talking with Jason Hensel. But, those are the things that I think are worth looking into.
Thank you.
You're looking for consensus on these ones as well, I assume? All right. How are everybody good? Jay, how you doing? Good? All right.
Awesome.
There you go.
So next steps, we're going to continue seeking input from the community by going out to several summer events. We've got a lot on the calendar. Again, we're focusing on the ones that attract more residents versus the larger regional events. We will be working through these remaining sections with the task force, which include transportation, community health, community services, public safety, parks, recreation, and housing. We are hoping to come back, aiming for September to give you another update and go through what the task force has discussed for these recommendations, as well as where we're leaning with the ones that we went over tonight. And so really, I think that wraps up the presentation.
All right, any final questions or comments for Becky?
No, awesome.
Okay, thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you.
And I just want
Go
to
ahead, Brett.
point out that Sarah has done, she's not able to be here tonight, but she has really done yeoman's work on this, and that this is a monumental task. And Becky is her sort of deputy project manager and backup. And so I really want to give major kudos to both of them. I don't get to do this very often, but I really appreciate her stepping up tonight and doing this. And as you can see, there's a lot of work that's gone into this and still more to go. And I think the one thing for the newer council members, I just want to bring home the point, is that when we started this process, council was adamant that we exhaust all avenues of community engagement. And we have really tried to push that envelope with this process, and we hope that it continues to yield and bear fruit. So I just want to point that out, because for a community of our size and a staff of our size, we are really trying to go above and beyond the engagement process to make sure that we're reaching as many people as we possibly can. And not using a consultant. We, through COVID, thank you. Through COVID, we really tried to do this in-house, and so that has had its own challenges as well. But I just want to recognize that, because this really is a monumental effort. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our park staff has been very patient, so we're going to move on to our mid-year parks update and budget request with Amanda Peterson, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, will present the item to council.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I have also invited Rob to come up, and he's going to cover a few points tonight. And then Doug, our Parks Maintenance Supervisor, is here as well, just in case any additional questions come up. Let's see here. There we go. Now we have a slide. So we really have four primary components of tonight's discussion. One is to provide you with a mid-year update on parks maintenance. The second is to request a reallocation of some of our existing 2022 budgeted funds. The third is to request some additional funding for 2022. And then the fourth is to provide you with a little bit of a preview of 2023. Not a lot of detail, but there's a few items in there we wanted to make sure that we got some feedback on. So I wanted to start tonight with just some of our current status. First item is our staffing level. I know we've had some conversations, not only in parks, but other areas in the department or throughout the city where we've had some challenges around staffing and filling all the positions that we have available. So at this point, at the time we wrote this, 16 of our 17 full-time positions were filled. We have now filled 17 of those 17. One is, the candidate has been selected. She's currently working for us as a seasonal, as well as in another role in the city. And so there will be a bit of a transition period before she's moved full-time into that parks role. Seasonal staffing, however, is still minimal at about 2.5 individuals out of 10 that we typically would be hiring at this point in the year. Some of the special projects that team has been working on are some of the turf rehabilitation at E.B. Raines Jr. Memorial Park. Specifically after Food Truck Carnival, we had an amazing turnout. The turf doesn't always love an amazing turnout, but the staff are working to reestablish, get that ready for the spring and summer season. And some of that involves reseeding, some of that involves some areas where they'll be actually replacing some of the sod. They're minimizing where they do that. And those are generally areas that were damaged previously, but the additional foot traffic just kind of pushed it right over the edge. They're also doing some turf rehab at Huron Crossing. That was patching some sod, and I believe that work was actually done today, as well as some reseeding at Wyco Park. Some of the other special projects they've been working on, you may have noticed some of the beds on 112th, on East 112th, have been pulling out some plant material, adding back some rock, cleaning those up. They're kind of going one at a time, getting those beds cleaned up as they have the opportunity to do so, and then we'll fill plant material back in as appropriate. And then the third piece there is for a little later this year, but on their work plan to do some concrete and shrub removal at the old recreation center, particularly where we're seeing overgrowth in a space that's not currently being used as it was a year ago when we had an open recreation center there. Some of the accomplishments so far this year are the implementation of the Park Ranger program. If you have not met Karen Keeney, she's our new Park Ranger. She was a seasonal last year for us and really has just fully embraced this full-time role, from engaging with the public to developing programs to working with our students and our day camp kiddos, and really engaging with park participants. So we really appreciate what she's bringing to that role, and just implementing a brand new position is hard for that first person who takes that role, and she has met that challenge head on. And then the second piece is just the cross-departmental team. We've been working closely with Public Works over the last few months, and I think that has gone well as well. Some of the challenges, as I mentioned previously, those full-time vacancies between January and April, and so we'll get into some ways to address that a little later in the presentation. The lack of seasonal staff, and then we're seeing that continued uptick in vandalism, particularly graffiti, as well as camping or inappropriate use of some of our park spaces. This slide, I won't read the whole slide, but I will share a few highlights with you. Some of the projects that we have in process over the course of 2022 in our capital improvement program. I would like to point out that the crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, is currently underway, and you should each be getting an email here in the next day. I just got confirmation from the Barry Dunn team as to when their schedule. So we'd like to invite you to participate in a one-on-one conversation with a member of that Barry Dunn team to provide some feedback specifically at EB Rains and Croak Reservoir as it relates to that CPTED project. So please be checking your email, and we'd love to have you each sign up for a spot if you're interested in doing that. I'd also like to identify that under that CPTED assessment, we didn't list the Village Greens fencing, the residential fencing between the park and the Village Greens townhomes that we've been discussing. That'll be an outcome from the CPTED as to exactly how we implement there. So it's not listed individually, but it is still on the project list. And then under pending funding, Rotary Park Pavilion is still listed as pending. However, since the time this presentation was completed, we did receive word from Adams County Open Space that we did receive grant funding to complete that project, which would be a partnership with the Rotary Club. They came forward earlier this year to offer funding for a pavilion. It wasn't enough funding to do that project in its entirety, but with grant funding from Adams County Open Space, we should be able to make that happen here later this year at Rotary Park. I kind of breezed through most of those. Are there any questions on this slide before I move on?
I have a question. So really quickly, the Kiwanis Pool Phase 2 upgrades. Can you remind us what those are and tell us, please, that is not going to interfere with the pool being open this year?
So it will not interfere with the pool being open this year. That is everything we didn't address in the first project. So the first project really looked at addition of the splash pad, the replacement of the bathhouses, the addition of the new pump room associated with the splash pad, and then the cashiers and lifeguard stations. So kind of that front portion of the property. This would address everything from kind of that line back. So resurfacing both pools, renovating the pump room itself, which if you've been in it, is reminiscent of many days past. Replacing the concrete deck, the plumbing and everything that's underneath that concrete deck. Those are kind of the highlights of it. We did also receive, I should have shared that earlier, we did receive a favorable recommendation from Adams County Open Space to fund that project as well. So the timeline for that is intended to be, they're working on design and assessment right now, so that that gets finished while the pool is open for the summer, and then we're able to bid out that work during the time that the pool is closed between Labor Day and Memorial Day.
Awesome.
So that is the plan.
Okay, great. Councilmember Kondo?
Yeah, I only, I only have one comment, and, you know, clearly I'm in Ward 3, and there's the Greenway Trail that goes west of Grant towards, you know, along that drainage. I think it's Farmers Canal or, yeah. Anyway, the one thing I noticed, I just wanted to bring to your attention was, it looks like we contract that out to somebody to mow down that grass or
So-
what have you.
Some portions of that are mowed through, I'm going to call it urban drainage, and I know I'm going to screw that up because it's
Mile
not
high
urban
flood
drainage anymore.
Mile High Flood Control.
Thank you. So when Mile High Flood District makes improvements to the drainage, they also take on some of the maintenance that's
they do?
associated with those
Okay.
drainage canals. So there's that bit piece of contracted maintenance. There's also some contracted work, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, that we've been using to help supplement the work that our staff is doing to compensate for some of those vacancies that we've experienced.
I just wanted to point out, and I know this because I used to work for my dad, who was a gardener, but they sprayed herbicide around some of the trees. And, you know, in part likely so that they don't have to do the weed eating sort of thing around that, but it may kill the trees. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware.
Yeah, and we can certainly confirm that any of the staff can confirm with
Yeah.
any contractor who's out there that
They
what they're
definitely
spraying is
sprayed along
appropriate
the
for that
fence
area or
Yeah,
modify
they
that practice.
sprayed along the fence line and the rock barriers, obviously, and that makes sense. But spraying around trees, I don't know. That one kind of tests logic.
So yes, Doug,
So-
Doug can certainly or did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so typically, in-house, we do spray tree wells. It is a general practice.
Okay.
Within the parks maintenance kind of realm of things, so, we do use pesticide, herbicides, kind of not directly underneath the tree, next to the actual, bark, but
Yeah,
kind
it
of
looks
spaced out
like
a
they
little bit.
sprayed right onto the tree.
Oh, yeah, that's
So,
not,
okay.
yep.
But thank you. And as I said, Doug will confirm with both our staff and any contractors that any spray that they're doing is being
Sure.
done appropriately.
Absolutely.
And we can, Amanda, reach out to Mile High as well and just make them aware
Yes.
that we've received that feedback and so that they're aware with their contractors.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
So I guess I wanted to ask about the Odell Berry Park. I know we've received funds from various sources, and we're not anywhere near there, but, and we're continuing to apply for them. But is there some point where we're just going to say, okay, now we just need to like come to city council and see if they're willing to, you know, pay the rest of it, or what? I mean, is there some deadline for that, or?
I don't think there's a hard and fast deadline. I would presume we'll have a part of that conversation, if you would like to, during the 2023 budget process. We are continuing, and as we continue through that budget process, hopefully we will learn a little more as to what grant funding we have or have not received. We've received we have received 1.5 million thus far from Adams County Open Space. We've submitted a request through congressionally directed spending. I haven't heard anything beyond some questions that were asked for clarification. So if we hear anything as to how that project is moving forward, I will certainly let you know. And then staff are researching several other options. They're both DOLA and not Great Outdoors Colorado, that's the funding source. Yeah, no, it's GOCO. Have cycles this fall that we intend to apply for. So we have some things in the works. Both the DOLA and GOCO cycles together, if we applied for kind of towards the maximum that are generally awarded with those two, are only about $700,000. And usually I don't use the word only and $700,000 in the same sentence, but this is such a large project that still the 1.5 million we have plus the 700,000 wouldn't get us a complete project. We could then have some conversation about, is implementation scaled back? Is it waiting until we have additional funding? Is it additional funding through general fund or other city dollars? But I would presume that we would have that conversation as we get into the budget process for next year.
Thank you.
All right, we don't have any other questions.
All right. So that kind of brings us to the rest of tonight. We've divided it into 3 sections for you, trying to put all the funding in some different buckets. So the first part of the conversation is reallocation of some existing 2022 funding. So the first piece, we have identified some salary savings as a result of having some vacancies from January through April, and also from not hiring as many seasonal employees as we typically would and have budgeted, because there simply weren't the candidates to bring on board. Our preference would be that we're hiring those in-house staff, whether they're seasonals or full-time staff members, to complete these tasks. Between those full-time savings and seasonal vacancies, as of right now, we're estimating that to be about $126,000 for the year. Certainly that number can vary as we have staff hired, as things change, but that's the estimate. We've identified some new expenses that could be offset by those salary savings. And really these are aimed to help replace the work that would have been done by those seasonal employees, or things that would have been done in the off-season to help kind of get caught up by our full-time staff when we had those vacancies earlier in the year. First, we have already implemented, and that is using Janiking to do restroom cleaning at EB Rains, at JC Park, and at Northwest Open Space on the weekends. So supplementing cleaning twice a day on each of the weekend days when we don't have as many of our full-time staff scheduled to work. The second piece of that is utilizing TerraCare, they're currently our contractor, to do right-of-way mowing and tunnel cleaning as needed. We have a current contract for an amount up to $15,000. If we were to continue to reallocate and staff were to be able to identify when additional work could be done by TerraCare, if we go up to, we could reallocate those dollars to allow for that contracted service to help offset the work that wasn't being, is unable to be scheduled with our current staff level. So that, the only action that could be needed, if that's if you're comfortable with this approach, would be anytime we get over $50,000, we would need to bring a contract back to you for formal action. Right now, that contract with TerraCare is under $50,000, but $15,000 will go fairly quickly. So if this is an approach you're comfortable with, it's likely something we would bring back to you as with a formal bid process and a larger contract.
So Amanda, I have a quick question for you, I guess,
Yes.
around salary savings. Seeing that we only have 2.5 out of 10 seasonal staffing positions filled, what are we doing to be aggressive and to get those positions filled, as opposed to just using these dollars to go out and hire contractors?
So we have made adjustments to pay. We have
Can you say more about that?
We have looked at our overall pay range and looked at where people's experience places them within that scale. So historically, we have generally started at the very bottom of the scale.
We're hiring at the minimum. We're not doing that.
But can you tell us the dollar amount?
I'd have to look that up.
Okay,
in
it's
terms
okay.
of
I was
the
just curious if
budget.
you knew, like, you're starting seasonals at $16 an hour, you're not
Do you
getting
know
any
that
bites.
off the top of your head.
$18
Okay.
now is what we're starting.
Okay.
And there have been times, I mean, I know Doug has had times where he tells me the seasonal number is 4 or 5. We've had people start and literally walk away and say, that was more work than I thought.
Yeah, okay.
And so we try to be upfront without scaring people off. We want to be upfront about what the work is, what the expectation is, that we're willing to train people, taking people that may not have a lot of experience, but are willing to learn and willing to work hard. And we have gained some really great employees that way that sometimes then move into those full-time roles when openings come up. It's a great training opportunity, but it's been a tough one the last few years to fill. I think there's a piece of it that is still a carryover from COVID and not hiring all of those seasonal positions because they're not returning to us. So when go back to not hiring seasonals in 2019, or 2020, sorry. We didn't have those 2020 hires to return in 2021. When we hired then a smaller number in 2021, we were kind of starting over again. And so I think that's had a longer term impact on us as well.
Okay. I guess I see your hand. I guess I just really want to challenge you to be more creative, because there are other places that you can get a job for $18 or $19 an hour and not have to be outside or not have to do the tough labor. And so if I'm in this job market, and which is very competitive right now, I may not want to work for the city because the dollars don't necessarily match the work. And so I guess I just want to challenge you to be, I guess, more creative, because I feel like this is a conversation that we have had every year since I've been on city council. The conversation that we just can't get enough seasonal. So because we keep having it, like, I really want to challenge you to figure out what it's going to take to get people into those positions. You know, is it really pushing up the pay? Is it adding more full-time positions so that we're not in this situation every year? Because I think one of the other barriers, frankly, is seasonal positions are not long-term positions, and people need to be able to pay their bills year-round. So I guess I would really love to challenge you to do that. I mean, this is just me speaking, and I'm interested in what the rest of council has to say, but I'm not in favor of continuing to throw out contracts. I want us to get our people in and get people working before we look at adding on different contracts. So go ahead.
So it's both of those things that you mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem. With pay, significant conversations that we have to have around employee compensation. And we're going to start those conversations in early July when Lori Graves, our third-party compensation consultant, is going to come in and do an introductory discussion with council. And also, she's doing a subset piece for the city on turnover, cost of turnover. So yes, we can pay more, and she's looking at the market, and she's going to help guide us on what more looks like, not just within certain pay grades, because if you think about where these positions are, so we've had the discussion around lifeguards. So parks maintenance workers are several steps above lifeguards, but they're still within that lower tier of our pay structure. Then all of the remainder of the pay structure needs to be adjusted comprehensively in order to address compression that would be created with paying more. So we've been doing what we can in terms of increasing pay for lifeguards in terms of where we bring them in, and then adjusting existing employees because we want to retain those employees. I read a statistic recently that new hires are on average making 7% more than existing employees. So we're gonna have that discussion when we talk with Lori about our current compensation plan. I do think that use of contractors is a short-term approach from this team's perspective. We don't want to use them long-term. However, if we don't use contractors, the impact is going to be very visible, and residents as well as all of council, you're going to be very unhappy with me and staff. So it's a short-term approach in our minds. And then, you know, if we're not able to, based on the competitiveness of the market, get in front of it through our compensation plan changes that we're going to be recommending. And then depending on what the market looks like next year, I mean, today's market is an employee-driven market. And so we're finding that as we're making new hire decisions, you know, prospective candidates are coming to us and asking us for more, and we're, you know, counter-offering and doing all of the things that are taking place right now in the market. So I think part of what I'll need from council is direction on where do you want to land in terms of what type of compensation system we provide, knowing that we need to take care of our existing employees, retain them, And because that's where that turnover cost comes into play, when we can lose an employee for $1, $2, $3, you know, sometimes upwards of $5, $10, $15, $20,000 plus, you know, there's a threshold where we may not be able to be competitive. So those are two really good points that you made, Mayor Pro Tem, and that's all underway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I saw Councilmember Kondo, your hand was up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So a couple of qualifying questions. So these seasonal vacancies, are they largely outdoor work-related? It's not the lifeguard positions, is it?
No, these are just our parks maintenance
Okay.
seasonal positions.
You know, having mowed lawns as a kid, I know how hard that is. And it may be that you just cannot find people in this day and age, young people that are willing to go and spend 8, 10 hours outside. So, you know, there may be merit in doing the contract sort of solution, because at the end of the summer, grass stops growing and, well, students also go back to school. But if you can't find the labor, then maybe a contract is the sort of thing that can at least tide you over. So I see the merit of that, and I really appreciate that. So it could be, with all due respect, it's just that you can't find people willing to go out and do the hard work. I'd be more than willing to go do that, but I'm currently on the council, so I guess I can't mow lawns for you all. Besides that, it would probably be bad for my complexion, and I'll get more wrinkles in my skin. But,
There's a hat as a part of the uniform.
oh, really? You do get the hat? Okay, well, I'm glad you thought about that. I don't know if that definitely would get me to go outside and mow my lawn. Actually, I pay somebody to do it. But, you know, all kidding aside, I think that if we're trying to solve this problem and we're trying to be expedient and sensible, the contract sort of option that you laid out here seems to be pretty reasonable to me. Can I get that hat? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sure we've got one. You know, and we're certainly, as I mentioned earlier, we would much prefer those to all be in-house employees, because we get a different level of work, right? There's a different connection to the community, to customer service, to getting to know the properties and the spaces, and we really value that. We also want to make sure that ultimately the work gets done, even when there's this challenge in the market filling those positions. We are very open to creative ideas, so if anyone has any suggestions, we absolutely would love to hear them. We did transition a couple of positions. I don't know if you remember from last year's budget, it feels like a really long time ago, from seasonal to full-time, knowing that we'd had this as a challenge. But there is that uptick during the summer months, and so we can't necessarily, at least at this point, say we should just have full-time employees and not seasonals, though those are easier to fill because there's a long-term commitment there, right, on our part for the employee and for the employee to us. Yeah, it's a tough spot for sure.
All right, does anyone else want to weigh in on this one? Is everybody okay with contracting and park staff getting a little more creative in the future with being aggressive and finding employees?
Yep.
All right, cool.
All right.
All right.
And again, and those are a balance, right? And that's why we said that 126,000 is a current estimate, but that can go up or down as they find seasonal staff that are willing to come on even for just a portion of the season.
Okay. All right, cool. It sounds like you've got direction there, so maybe we can move on to the next one.
All right, so capital outlay. This is the next area we have some unexpended but budgeted funds. $150,000 was budgeted to replace 3 of our pickup trucks in the department. Through direction from council to replace those with electric vehicles. We are unable to get those vehicles until late 2023 or 2024. So we're on a wait list for them, but those dollars won't be expended in 2022. So one possibility, one request is to ask for some additional equipment that would help create some efficiencies. This is just really an interim savings. Those dollars would still need to be reallocated for 2023 for those original 3 electric vehicles. And I'm going to actually turn this one over to Rob for a moment to go through each of the four pieces of replacement equipment in a little more detail for you.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. So there's a few things that we've looked at that we think will really help us out to really kind of cut down on labor hours and use some technology to help us. So if you look at the autonomous painter, that is a GPS aligned autonomous painter. It's about $45,000, and that comes with extra battery and all the bells and whistles that you need with it. The idea behind this is, talking to Doug today, we have about 18 to 20 soccer fields. We have a football field and baseball field, and this can do all of those. And once you set it to the parameters, you never have to set it again. It just goes out there and will paint because it's all GPS oriented. So that saves us about 10 hours a week in man hours or labor hours just for doing that. The other thing that Doug described to me today was that sometimes when the paint goes away, we have to reset the field. That is a 2 to 3 day process for staff because they have to go out and measure, they have to make sure it's square and all that. Once the autonomous painter is programmed, we don't have to program it again, and that's true for the 11v11, 9 versus 9, 7 versus 7 soccer fields, baseball and football. So once those are all programmed in, we just take it out there, set it down, hit the button for which one we want it to do, and it will spray. It also uses less paint because it's very consistent in how it goes. It glides versus somebody pushing or a ride-on behind where it's employee driven. So that helps us save paint as well. So that saves us some cost as well. Because it will have 2 batteries, it can be charging 1 battery. So it'll operate about 2.5 hours. And the only time we need to stop is to refill it with paint or to recharge the battery. So the person that normally would be doing this is still watching this, but they can be doing something else for about anywhere from 2 hours to 2.5 hours. They can be actually doing something else at Northwest Open Space or one of the other fields while this is actually doing the work of painting the fields. And it's so precise. We had a demonstration. It's amazing how precise it is. And it's pretty fun to watch too when they do like the corner kicks and all that kind of stuff. It's actually pretty exciting to watch. The next one is a Z-Track mower, which Doug and I were talking, that may not be the right term for it. It's more for right-of-way mowing or for streetscapes. The problem we have right now is this mower that we have right now is it's 10 years old. It's get beat up quite a bit because it's hitting rocks and cans, anything that you would see in right-of-ways and all that. So we really need to upgrade that so that we're actually more efficient with the right mower. And we're gonna look at a different type of mower. The 50,000 is probably about right for the right mower that we need. And we do believe that that's something that we want to replace because the other one's broken down a lot. And so when it's out of service, then we're doing it by hand or doing other things that just take longer time. Any questions on either of those two?
Service life of the autonomous painter, how long does that gonna
I
last?
think it's a 8 to 10 year warranty or service life on it. Do you remember, Doug? I think it's 8 to 10 years.
Great, thank you.
And there's really only 2 companies. We already bid this out, so we like this one. This is the one we actually tested, and there's another one out there. I can't remember what the name of it is. Do you remember? Turf Tank is the other company, so, but we looked at this one, we liked it, and then we bid it out.
Yeah, I just did some quick math here. You're probably saving about $10,000 per year.
I'm sorry?
So you're probably saving $10,000 per year, so 8 years of this, 80,000.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
And it's so efficient. I think it's great. And there's more technology coming with autonomous mowers, and there's a company called Gray's out there they're out of Fort Collins that is working on autonomous mowers that would really help a lot too, because you just have somebody on there with the 4-gang mowers out there. They're just going back and forth all day. And if you can have somebody doing that without having a person on it, but there's somebody there to make sure that it's safe and all that, would be incredible. So we're looking at that as well.
Great.
So the next.
Just a moment.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Sure.
Okay, Councilmember Walker.
This is more of a question. Well, I guess when we get more to, let's wait till I get to the consent report. Hang on. Because I'm curious about if we, the electric for lighting is at that 150 grand that we reallocate now, we're gonna have to go back to the well and dip for again. And forgive me, I haven't been through the budget process, but would that come from the general fund? We just have to
It would. So the way this works is we would go ahead and budget for it in the proposed 2023 budget if we receive consensus to move forward. So what's going to happen is if we don't reallocate that funding's not going to be spent this year. And so that goes back into the general fund balance.
Right.
So it increases the fund balance by $150,000 to keep it simple. But we're not going to have the vehicles until next year. So what I asked Amanda and her team to do was, as part of really going through, and they'll get to this at the latter part of the presentation when they went through and did inventory of every one of our parks, was to ask for what you need, where are areas that we can move the needle through, replacing equipment that's outdated. The other thing is, we could hold off on these expenses and bring them forward as package requests, and council can prioritize them in the 2023 budget. However, through my conversations with staff, with Amanda, Rob, and Doug, the need exists today. And so I think we'll see the immediate benefit through the remainder of this year if council supports that reallocation of funding.
And I really believe we would be asking for these things in the future anyway, because I think it's the right way to go to be more efficient. And really, these type of operations are much more economic or environmentally friendly as well, because they're battery operated versus the gas operated stuff that we're using now. So it helps with that as well. So on this next slide, these are two pieces of equipment that I think we desperately need. Parks usually has a pole behind. They use a vehicle to pole behind to do aeration and to do spreading of fertilizer, and also to do their spraying operations. These pieces of equipment, one person can do this, and it's a lot safer because you don't have two pieces of equipment out there. They're easier to get to the location. They're much safer for the operator because they can see, they're right there. They're not pulling something and trying to see what's going on behind them. The one on the left is a stand-behind sprayer, which will also serve as a spreader. And the other one, the stand-on aerator, is an aerator, which also will serve as a spreader. So you can do dual operations with both of these pieces of equipment. And as you can see, it's just one person. When we're going out now, usually takes two people to deliver the equipment and work hand in hand. So this is much more efficient for us to be able to do this as well. Any questions on these pieces of equipment? I know Doug's excited about them.
So yeah, let me jump in. Going back up a slide. So the anonymous painter sounds fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it's going to save a lot of time. I'm really excited about that. I don't know that I want to watch it for very long, but it sounds really awesome. On the Z-Track mower, is that an all-electric mower, or are there all-electric models available?
What we're looking at is not an electric one, but these are
Okay.
much more efficient and
Sure.
much less carbon than the 10-year-old one that we're using now, for sure.
Totally. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was just curious if y'all had done the research to see if there were all-electric options
We're still
out
waiting
there.
for the FEEP. When I presented to you a few months ago, or about a month and a half ago on FEEP, we're still waiting for all that data to come back on
Okay.
all that. But we are looking at what is out there for battery-operated equipment.
Okay.
But one thing I want to continue to remind is we have to have the infrastructure to be able
Yep.
to charge the equipment. So
Yep,
we have to
totally.
do that before we get the equipment, or else we'll just have the equipment and won't be able to be charged.
Yep, I know that's an ongoing conversation.
Right.
And then the other question I had was, it's kind of stemming off of what Councilmember Walker asked around, if we're gonna spend this $150,000 next year, and we're gonna go and reallocate $150 next year as well. I guess I'm trying to understand what our fleet needs are for 2023. And, if we were allocated to get a couple of electric Ford Lightning trucks, and we're going to need, 4 trucks next year. Like, I'm just a little anxious about spending the money for the fleet. Does that make
Sure.
sense? I don't know that I'm articulating it
No,
well.
I know what you mean. So will
Yeah.
we be able to meet the needs ongoing for the other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, especially knowing that we have this money budgeted for fleet replacement, like, if we don't spend that money on fleet replacement this year, are we missing an opportunity next year to fully replace the vehicles
Right.
that we need to replace?
Right. I think there is that opportunity that we're missing it, but I think that there's always it always is kind of refilling the bucket, so to speak, going forward for capital type equipment. Each year, we look at all of our equipment, and if it rates at a 12 or higher, we're recommending that we replace it, mostly because it's probably obsolete. It doesn't have the efficiencies that it normally would have. It probably doesn't have the standards that you want for burning gas and fuel and things like that these days. So each year, you're just pushing that out another year. And we, like I told Doug last year when we said, we're not gonna get the Lightnings, can we make those trucks last another year? So that just puts a little more pressure on our fleet mechanics to make sure these vehicles are continuing to work. But I think everything just falls back in line, and you just, when you need it, and you go on, and maybe we don't be able to replace everything that's a 12 this year. We push some of those, but the 13s, 14s, 15s, we can replace, depending on how much money is available. And I think every year in the budget, the money that's available is different every year, depending on how revenues come in and all that, and then how much is allocated for capital. So we put together those packages, and I think everybody kind of competes every year for what are we gonna replace from a capital standpoint. So each department has so many vehicles, and then we look at them, and Jim and our fleet and myself look at those and say, which vehicles really need to be replaced, and can we get by with these again so that we can continue to move forward and replace the ones that absolutely need to be replaced.
And I think what you just said is exactly why I'm a little nervous.
Okay.
Is of spending this $150,000 before we know what our fleet needs are gonna be. Do you feel like the 4 pieces of equipment that you have, that you've outlined here are like must have tomorrow, like, you know?
I wish we had the autonomous painter about 3 months ago when we were just
Okay.
getting ready to start. And the mower is gonna be that's a replacement anyway, coming up anyway. And the 2 other pieces of equipment probably are gonna replace obsolete equipment anyway, and those would be requested for in the future anyway. So eventually, we were gonna ask for them anyway. We're just kind of putting these ahead of the other ones because they're not available right now.
Council, I don't know if this will help address some of your concerns, Mayor Pro Tem. Council's going to see the entire list of fleet needs. And so, you know, there may be some discussion that has to be had by council in terms of we want to fund these vehicles and maybe not these vehicles, or maybe not fund some equipment over here. So I do understand the perspective in terms of the money's budgeted this year. We want to use it for these other purposes. To Rob's point, those other purposes that we're proposing tonight would come forward in next year's budget anyways. Plus, you're going to have, you know, truly the money's not going to be expended until next year, because the money's expended at the point that the vehicles are purchased. So we would not even be bringing contracts to council for approval of the vehicles until next year, because we can't get the vehicles. So it's really, does council want to just go ahead and put that $150,000 back into the general fund, and then it's reappropriated as part of the 2023 budget process and not expend funding on any of these purchases this year? Does that help, or?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I guess I'm a little on the fence, so I want to hear what other council members have to say. Councilmember Goff, and then Walker, and then.
I have one question and then first, and that is that these 4 different pieces of equipment, do you know that if you order them, that you're going to be able to get them, or is it going to be like the Ford pickup truck?
I think the autonomous painter is like a 2-week lead time once we place the order, and I think the other ones are all available still.
Okay, so that's kind of my thing in terms of balancing it. It seems, you know, some in the future, down the line, we're going to get a request for these pieces of equipment, and at that time, they'll probably cost more than they are now.
There's no doubt they're gonna cost more.
And it sounds like, you know, if we could spend the money now and get these things sooner, then we're going to start saving money sooner. So I think I'm in favor right now, unless I hear something different from someone else, of supporting this reallocation.
Councilmember Walker?
I definitely would be in support for like the autonomous line painter and the Z-Track, but I was thinking maybe more of a reserved approach, and maybe only allocating $100,000 and leaving that $50,000 in the general fund for those later requests and everything, once we have a full view of everything that we need, instead of just writing the blank check.
Councilmember Kondo?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'm going to take maybe a middle viewpoint between Councilmember Goff and Walker. I agree that at least the first two items for sure, the autonomous walker and the Z-Track mower. And I've actually seen you go out with that aerator, and you have to have a separate kind of a lead truck or follower truck, I forget, which one of the ways.
It pulls the aerator.
Yeah, you got the tractor, and then you got another vehicle driving for safety. So that sucks up two people. So, again, perhaps maybe we don't get both the stand behind sprayer or the stand-on aerator. Maybe you just get one of the two. Maybe it's the stand-on aerator, because you said you could do both the spraying and the aeration, so you get 2 for 1 there. But, you know, that's where I see possible economic benefit is, at least now it's only one individual as opposed to 2 people going all over the city.
All right, do you two want to weigh in?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree a lot with what Councilmember Goff has said, but I'm also happy to support the middle of the road if, you know, we don't want to reallocate all of the funds now, but yeah, it's going to be coming back to us eventually anyways. And like Councilmember Goff said, it'll be more expensive, like everything always is. So I would support the reallocation.
Okay.
And I too echo what Councilmember Whitwich is saying too, and also can see why you would want to get the aerator that does the dual, also does the spraying, and also just to, you know, take care of our turf that we have. So, you know, using less water since we have you know, we're really committed to saving water, conserving water. So, and yeah, everything's gonna be more expensive. I mean, that's just everything. I feel like we all just said that, so I would support the middle of the road too, with my, with Councilmember Kondo, with getting in addition, the autonomous painter, Z-Track mower, and the stand-on.
One thing I would add is, I just did the capital and sent it out to all the directors today. I don't think that the capital request this year is gonna be as high as it's been in some years, because we've done a pretty good job of updating equipment. When I went through and saw what was 12 or higher, it just didn't seem like there was as many as there'd been in the previous years. I'm just taking a wild guess because I've done it for 5 years now, but it just did not seem like there was as many requests from some of the other departments. I think the police vehicles, are only 5 this year, where sometimes there's been as many as 8 or 9. I don't believe planning's asking for anything except maybe 1. And all these are general fund. The sanitation, that takes care of itself. The water fund, they kind of take care of itself. So the general fund, it does not seem like there's going to be as many requests for vehicles this year as what we've had in the past, just as a point of something to consider.
Okay, all right, so let me see if I'm picking up 5 that council's throwing down. So I'm hearing everybody wants the autonomous painter. You really sold that one, congratulations. I heard Z-Track mower was yes. Yep, okay, cool. And then I heard, okay, so this is where I'm not as totally clear. So the stand behind sprayer, can I just get a quick thumbs up, thumbs down?
So let me clarify something real quick.
Okay.
The aerator and the stand behind sprayer, they both spread, but they don't spray. One sprays and spreads, one aerates and spreads.
Okay.
Does that make
so you
sense?
want one- No.
They both don't spray. Is
Okay.
that right,
so-
Doug? Yeah, that's right.
So you want one of each.
Yeah, so Doug, which one would you prefer? If you were gonna get one, which one is better? That's what it comes down to, is if we were gonna choose one, which one is gonna give us the most bang for our buck now?
And which one do you need them, like, thumb up?
That's
It's going to be the aerator.
the aerator, yeah. So
All
that,
right.
We get to that point, though, I just think it's only $12,000. So just get them all.
if we buy them from the same place, we might get a discount.
Okay, so I saw a lot of thumbs up over here. I saw kind of a
which
lukewarm.
one?
So we're talking about just reallocating the 150,000 at this point and getting all 4 pieces of equipment. Okay. Where are you? Huh?
Yeah.
All 4. Where are you?
I mean,
Okay, all right, so we've got, so we're a little half and half right now.
Well, so if I can interject, I mean, if we do this purely on a consensus basis, which is how council operates, there is enough support for the 4. However, I don't want this to become an issue later on when Jason brings the supplemental budget appropriation where he'll actually do the actual moving of the money. So I'd prefer that there is council support tonight for either 4 pieces of equipment or the 3 pieces of equipment.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that we didn't have full consensus on the 4 pieces of equipment. All right, so we're definitely, I think we're in a place where we have to decide stand behind sprayer, stand on aerator.
If I may, I did back up a slide for you, just to show that the 4 pieces of equipment are actually less than
it's
the
not quite the
full
whole
150,000. So all 4 pieces of equipment would be reallocating 119,000 of the 150,000. If we reallocated for 3 of those pieces of equipment, it would be minus the $12,000.
Okay,
So you'd still have about $31,000 left.
and could that 31,000 be committed to fleet in 2023?
It would just go back into the general fund and then it will be appropriated as part of the 2023 budget.
Okay,
I'll go.
Councilmember Walker. You said you were comfortable with 100,000?
I just picked 2 out of 3.
Okay,
That's working.
all right, any gift there?
What do you,
Oh,
Well,
no, I'm
if we
trying to
go
get
to
us to
100.
consensus.
so with the stand on aerator, I mean, 119 is all 4?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna put pressure on you. Okay. How do y'all want to move forward? Jay, where are you?
Now that you mentioned that, it's basically like if we don't use this money,
Goes back into
goes
the
back.
package,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I'm fine with the 4, but you said if you can get it from the same place, get a little deal, so we can like feel like we won,
Yeah.
So you got a deal. I'm for that.
All right, you're good with 4?
Yeah.
All right, there you go. You're getting 4 new pieces of equipment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Back to Amanda.
Okay.
The good news is you saved a slide because you already had the discussion, so we can skip over this discussion slide unless you have anything else on those reallocation requests. All right.
Boom, done.
So that moves us on to the second category, which is a request for additional funding. So these are dollars not allocated in the 2022 budget that we would like to bring before you for consideration. So the first major category is fire mitigation, and really this should be it's fire mitigation, hazard tree removal, the same practice of pruning our trees, removing dead plant material, really plays both roles, and those are fairly integrated. Our current budget for hazard tree or fire mitigation that we contract out is about $10,500 for each year. Generally, that allows us to work in 1 or 2 areas that are really specifically defined on an annual basis. So this year, those dollars were planned for Croak Reservoir. That allows for the removal of probably 2 to 3, closer to 2 larger trees, and then pruning of some specific areas. In a few moments, you'll see some photos of some additional areas that really could use a significant amount of work. And this is work that at $10,500 a year, we'll never catch up with. So whether we add additional funding this year in 2022 to do that, or it's a future consideration, it's something that we really need to be able to tackle at some point. And most of these removals are beyond what our in-house staff are able to do with the equipment and the staff that we have available in their training. So our proposed new expenses are approximately $100,000 for fire mitigation and additional hazard tree removal. There's 3 primary areas, the Farmers Highland Canal, Claude Court, and Croak Reservoir. And if you were to decide to move forward, that would also need consensus and a 2022 supplemental appropriation. And Rob and I are going to trade places for a moment again. He'll go through each of those areas in a little more detail.
So one of the things we noticed when I started working with parks is Doug took me on a tour. We went through some of the areas, and there is a ton of dead trees, branches, and all that, mostly along the Highline Canal, over there just to the east of Northwest Open Space. And I know that we've gotten some complaints from some of the people. They're really concerned about this because of the fire. And I am too now, because I've seen all this and it's so dry. But I really do think this is something that we need to prioritize going forward. And we will ask for this money this year, but this will be an ongoing ask until we get caught up, and it will continue on in the future so that we can make sure that we're taking care of these trees. The hazard trees, just like the snow we just recently got, created a bunch more hazard trees for us. We're still trying to catch up from all the broken limbs and all that. And there will be some that we don't see. And when you're walking around an area like Croak Reservoir, you might see a branch fall, and some of them are large. And so what we want to do is be able to have the resources available to us to go out, assess these areas, and make sure that we have the money to get professionals in to come in and take care of these trees and cut down the limbs that may be dangerous for people, and also make sure that we're clearing the areas so that if we did have a fire, we weren't creating a more fueled fire because of the dead branches and all that around there. So the Farmers Highline Canal is the first one we looked at, and there's two areas. One just to the west of Huron Street and one on the other end that are really bad, that have a lot of just laid trees that are dead. And if you go through there, you'll see that. The pictures really don't do it justice. It's kind of hard to get a picture out there of all that stuff, but we just took some pictures one day, and there's a lot of stuff out there. The Farmers Highline Canal this October, I think it's the end of October, the Highline Canal, they will come do, and they will do the south side because that's their area. But the north side of the canal is our responsibility. So that's what we're looking at, is cleaning that up. And we'll work with Farmers Highline Canal when they do theirs. They'll come through. They have equipment that's specific for this, and they'll come through and take a lot of the dead trees and a lot of that out. But we'll do the north side. We'll have to do the north side ourselves. They won't do the north side. Claude Court, right across the street from M&O, there's some wires that run through, and it's a big overgrown area. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm just talking to you guys, so. So there's a huge overgrown area there. It's been a point of contention of whether or not it's the railroad, whether it's the RTD. We do have some of that responsibility, we're pretty sure. There's a easement there, but I know the railroad won't do anything. They just are very difficult to deal with to get them to do stuff. So we're probably gonna have to take care of that ourselves. And if you've driven along there, those trees actually expand out almost to the road, and a lot of the equipment can get hit. So that's one of the areas we'd like to trim back and clean out some of the dead trees in there as well. And then the other one is Croak Reservoir, which I walked the other day, and this is more of a hazard tree area because they're so tall. There's a couple of cottonwoods out there I know that Doug's team has identified that need to be removed. And I think, what'd you say, Doug? It was just for those two trees was gonna be about $9,000? $9,000 just to remove two cottonwood trees that are dangerous. So, I mean, you can see that eats up that budget pretty quickly. And so those are, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, that's really the, what we're looking at as far as the fire mitigation and tree hazard mitigation. And we're asking, I believe it's for $100,000 to be able to do that this year if it's possible.
So
To
Rob,
get that done, yes.
I'm gonna start us off with a couple of questions.
Sure.
So I have had a couple of emails back and forth with a resident outlining some concerns about the Northwest Open Space, the Oscar Arnold area.
Right.
And I'm not seeing that area reflected up here.
That's
Is
the-
there a reason?
Yeah, no, the Oscar Arnold area, that's the furthest west part of the
Highline Canal.
Highline Canal
Okay.
area. And I think I know who you're talking about, and we
Yeah.
have a meeting scheduled
Yeah.
for next Friday, or this Friday, with some residents out there,
Yeah.
with the fire department, if he responds to us, to come out and talk to the residents about the fire mitigation as far as what we're mowing, that mow band, so that if it's a fire break, basically. And we believe that we are going above and beyond what the fire department even recommends, but I think this gentleman wants to have more conversation and make sure he understands what our mitigation program is.
Okay, and
So
I,
two areas of concern that he has, the piece that Rob just mentioned, and then this piece
And
closer
North
to
And this piece as well,
Huron.
yes.
yeah, and Northwest Open Space as a
Yeah.
whole. I guess the piece that, you know, in conversations with him, I think he has a really valid point is, do we have a fire mitigation plan written down anywhere?
We do, and because of all the stuff that we've been doing the last 2 weeks, I'm a little behind in getting it back to Amanda to get it updated. But we did do a bunch of updates, we just haven't got it to publish it yet.
Okay, great. I think that's something that's very important to share with
I
him
agree,
on Friday. And I think even sharing it with the community, I mean, in light of the Marshall Fire, I mean, we really are facing a climate in which something like that could happen in our
Absolutely.
backyard. So I appreciate the mitigation planning. The one other question I had before I'll pass it on to other council members is the Claude Court section. I see the wire or the cable there. What responsibility does Excel have to trim the trees around that particular
We
area?
contacted Excel, that's not a power wire, it's a
Okay.
cable. So
Okay.
we have to contact either Comcast or CenturyLink
Okay.
to see if they would be willing to come out and do that. I'm not sure if they will, because it's not a hazard like an electrical
Yeah.
is, because
Okay.
it's low voltage.
Okay, that's great. All right, I see a hand from Councilmember Condo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Actually, I was going to ask a question on that line, so. Put that. But I do want to go to the two cottonwood trees. Are those in a location that if they fell down, they could potentially injure somebody?
I
or are
believe
they
so. Doug
in the
has
middle of
more
nowhere
information.
where they fell down? Not a big deal.
Yeah, so the two cottonwood trees, the forestry team did a track assessment on it, and it is on the Naiad side bridge, so they are on the, west side of the bridge there.
Okay, so
the
within,
targets
the fell
are-
radius is
Yes.
within range of a path.
Yep.
And then my follow-up question is, if a tree falls in the forest and,
Does Doug hear it?
yeah, and you're not there, do you hear that? No, thank you, I appreciate that.
All right, did I see another hand over there? All right, so you're probably looking for consensus on this request?
I think, yeah, we need consensus, and then we'll have to have additional money.
It's certainly up to you if you want to have that conversation piece by piece, or if you'd like to go through all of the 2022 requests, or the 22 additions before you have that consensus conversation.
There's a couple other special projects that we haven't talked about yet.
Y'all have a preference?
Well,
Do you want to do them all, or do you want to do them one by one?
I don't, it seems to me that as I had looked at this before, that the fire mitigation is probably the top priority, so.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we could do this one and then we could look at the other ones.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Concur.
Sure. So we'll look at this one, and then the other ones we'll take as a package. Okay. Where are folks on fire mitigation, additional spending? Yeah? Okay. We've got full consensus on that one.
Okay? So we,
Go through the other stuff? No, you can go for it.
Thank
you
you
want
all.
me to do it? Okay. All right, so the next special projects that we have, if you're over at the Eleanor Wyatt Centennial Garden, which is just north of the marketplace there, there's a bunch of flagstone that are broken and torn up. We estimate that's gonna be about $15,000 to fix that and do some of the, rebuild the planter beds and supplement the plat material over there to get that looking better. It's just been kinda, beat up a little bit, it just needs to be refreshed. And then, the Croak Reservoir railing, I went out and looked at it, and it's got like a rust film on it and all that, and it really probably needs to be taken care of by some professionals that know how to do powder coating and get that in place. If you look at a couple of pictures, some of the plates are rusted pretty bad, and they would have to be ground off or sandblasted and then repowder coated. So that's a fairly expensive one. We're estimating at $50,000. We really need to get a professional out there, because there's a lot of painting that has to go because of the style of the railing that it is. But we think 50,000 would probably get us a good start or get it done. But it does need to be addressed at some point. Then the next section are really all the streetscapes. And I think I might have sent the pictures wrong to Amanda. Some of them don't really match the locations, but all the locations are right. They just might not have the right picture. Okay? So these are just all the areas where streetscapes where it's been kind of beat down and some of the gravel's missing, and we'd really like to refresh those, because these are really where people come into the city, and it would make them look a lot nicer.
Councilmember Goff?
I just wanted to clarify, if you're talking about refreshing, are you talking about refreshing also the old logo or just?
That is a
plain
separate
material?
project.
Okay.
I talked to Kent this morning about that, and he said that they are going to be coming, I believe,
Next
next
week.
Monday, to ask you, or to bring to council on the entryway signs. So that's a different project completely. The signs would be separate, and we're just talking about the landscaping.
And that project is to hire a contractor to come up with what new entryway signage could look like. So in theory, if council supports, it would be replacement of the old logo in key areas, but really looking at our signage comprehensively at entryways and where there are additional opportunities to enhance entryway signage. If you've seen in Thornton, they launched new entryway signage, not necessarily the grand entryway signage off of highways, but when you go south on Washington Street off of 104th, you see that vertical signage that they have off of the roadway. And so that's the concept that we have in mind in bringing that project forward to you all for feedback next week.
Would those logos include like the ones on the I-25 bridge? Are those ours or that CDOT's or
Logos in terms of Seymour, Councilmember Walker.
the ones that are on, like when you're, like when you
Yes.
come to the city, not just these ones on here, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think on Community Center Drive Bridge, we have Northglenn. So we'd be looking at that bridge, 120th, 104th, all the different entry points. So that is development, that project's development of concepts and design of what new signage can look like. And then there'll be the funding piece of it that comes later.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So a couple of clarifying questions here regarding the Eleanor Wyatt. When you say replace or supplement, are you thinking potentially xeriscaping? Is that an option here if we attempt to become a little bit more water friendly?
Sure, it really depends bed by bed. So there are some beds, there's really great opportunity for xeriscaping. There's some, like the Rose Garden, where it really showcases
You don't want to get rid of that.
those historical plants.
Yep.
Where we've lost some over the years. So being able to replenish plants in those types of spaces may not be 100% xeric.
Understand. Second clarification question, that stanchion right there in the middle picture, is that in danger of totally failing and potentially becoming a hazard?
No, it's just mostly surface rust.
Okay, so
Yeah,
cosmetic.
But it does need to be repainted and taken care of, or it's going to eventually.
It'll eventually break away. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councilmember Hermio.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So do you believe that it will cost $50,000 to remove and paint so there's no rust on that railing at Crook Reservoir? I mean, that's a lot of money.
It might be a little short, I think, because it's going to be because they're either going to have to take the railing off and do it, or they're going to have
Labor
to
intensive.
protect everything around it when they spray it.
Hmm.
So it's going to be very labor intensive. I'm hoping $50,000 will do it.
Wow. I don't know. I don't know. I do see quite a bit of sanding and masking, but so how long is this space? It's just right in the front, right? Like right when it's just that area. It's not like.
It's a long fence. It goes.
Is it?
It goes around
Okay.
that whole front area there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. It's to protect from going into where the reservoir is, and it goes all the way along that front area.
Oh, okay. Oh, and you're talking about both the front and the back. There's two levels. Okay.
And it is important that this is a powder coat finish and not necessarily a painted finish. Otherwise, it's going to be
It'll rust again.
much more regular, well, and it'll have to be redone on a much more regular basis.
Yeah.
And as you've seen surfaces, particularly metal surfaces that get repainted without sandblasting and without powder coating, then you can tell over time very quickly what's been painted and what hasn't. And that tends to deteriorate even faster the next time. So we would suggest if we're going to do this, would be a powder coat process and not a paint, just a surface paint
Okay.
or an in-place paint. Does it have to be done right now? No, that certainly is up to council's discretion as to where your priorities are. And there's lots of things that could land on that priority list, right? And we know that this isn't all inclusive.
All right, I've got a couple of things. One is, so looking at the railing at Crook Reservoir as well as some of the streetscapes refresh, are these something that we're able to get more on like a maintenance calendar where like every 3 to 5 years we're looking at doing this and perhaps it's less expensive because we're, planning and doing the maintenance in the interim as opposed to these projects that just pop up?
I would suggest on the streetscapes refresh, if there's ongoing operating budget to continually replace some of that plant material or hardscape as it ages, then yes, we could certainly do that on an ongoing basis. Projects like the railing at Croak Reservoir, I mean, that railing has been in place since 2006. So those are, I would consider that to be more in our capital improvement list, where it's not something that's done, yes, it's cyclical, but it's a much longer cycle than what we would see in our operating budget.
Okay, that's helpful. And then on the streetscape refresh, what would it cost to do abatement of the 2 signs and just get them down since we're going to be doing work over there anyway? I'm just curious, not
Just
asking.
to remove the signs?
Yeah, just take them down.
I mean, we would do that in-house.
In-house, my staff in operations could probably do that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be over there anyway, but.
I would suggest if we remove the signs, it's going to be more difficult to do it just as a refresh because the sign currently kind of is our backdrop and our ending point for landscaping. There's not any landscaping behind the sign. So that just could be an additional piece
And we
we'd
would
have to look
put
at.
something in there to replace it, so.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
ask.
no,
I was
good
just
No,
curious.
it's a good question.
And then the one other piece I feel like we're kind of missing from the streetscapes refreshes, these are all really good spots, but I heard from a resident recently that she feels like since 104th South on Huron, she feels like since we took out all of the grass on the section near the sidewalk and replaced it with
Like
the
gravel,
rock and
yeah.
the gravel, that it looked really great at first. And now there's just a lot of trash and dirt collection that just makes it look really gross. And so I don't know if there's a way to refresh that area or clean it up, maybe I just want to ask the question because it's been brought up a couple of times. And I'm sure there are other areas in the city similar to that, but that's the first one that's been coming to mind.
I think that is that's a maintenance issue versus a additional funding to change it or replace it. So yes, we can add that into a work plan outside of additional funding for replacement of, the cobble doesn't need to be replaced, it just needs to be cleaned out. I don't think we're at a point where we need to pull the cobble out and replace eventually that landscape fabric that's under the cobble starts to deteriorate, so then you get more weeds popping up and then you're more dependent on spray. We're not there yet, but yes.
Timing-wise, I think it would be good to wait until after we replace that stretch of road this summer.
Okay.
Here on street project, and then after that's done, because it'll be a mess, we'll go out and then refresh it after that.
Awesome, that's great. Okay, so we've got these 3 different projects. We're looking at Eleanor Wyatt Park, Croak Reservoir railing, streetscapes refresh. Where are folks? What do y'all think?
You want to do them one by one or for the whole?
Do you want to do them one by one? Okay, let's do them one by one. So let's do Eleanor Wyatt Centennial Park. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Been needing it.
Oh yeah, it's rough.
Oops.
Where they
This
have
is where the sculpture garden is.
Yeah.
It's the backside of Cinzetti's.
Okay.
All right, so you've got consensus there. All right, next one is Croak Reservoir railing.
Yeah, I don't see how you can.
Oh, no.
The other
that a middle
option you
pump?
have is we would bring it forward as a package request in 2023 budget,
Okay.
and we look at it next year.
Okay, so option 1 is bring it forward in the 2023 budget. package request. So thumbs up for that.
What was it? What was the
So,
second?
What will be the
or
second?
second option, fund it now. I'm sorry, I didn't. So, budget, bring it forward with the 2023 budget request, or fund it now and approve it as Parks have asked for right now.
So I move that we vote on option one.
Okay, so let's start with that one. So bring it with the 2023 budget, or folks. Great, okay. All right, and last one, streetscapes refresh.
Can I just make a comment about that? I'm having a little bit of difficulty envisioning that the sign design project that's going to come forward, that's going to do all the signs in the city, or think about redoing them. And then some of these would be with the new logo or whatever. I'm just wondering if whatever that study or whatever it is comes up with something that would, if we refresh these now and then that comes back with something like we should do these kind of signs, or that's going to mess up what we just, that's my only concern about that. Is that maybe we should wait and go.
It is a good point. So there might be a middle ground here in terms of giving these areas some TLC, but not doing so much that it's $10,000 worth, and then hold off until we get through the sign project, entryway sign project, and then because we do have the opportunity to look at landscaping improvements with the signs, and then really it's going to be a matter of council prioritizing which signs you want to do first. So it could be that some of these don't get rehabilitated or renovated, is probably the better word to use, until 2024, 2025. But we can have that conversation. And then if there's something that we need to do more next year, we can add that to the budget.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that. So are we just going through and using a contract to go and do the maintenance, clean up these areas? Or are we looking at pulling the landscape fabric and redoing everything?
So for the refresh, and at $10,000, that is an in-house refresh, definitely not a contract. 'Cause
Okay,
that
I
would
just wanted
be,
to clarify.
that would probably be $10,000 per bed. So it truly is just a in-house spruce up, being able to pull out some of the plant material that's not thriving, replace that, replace landscape fabric, replace some of the rock and hardscape to clean up those spaces. It definitely does not replace the signage project that's a full remove and replace, particularly in those locations like the 104th and I-25, where you've got the large monument sign, right? Pulling those out, as you mentioned earlier, would be impactful to anything that we add to that space. At the same time, by the time construction happens, it's at least a full season down the road.
Okay. All right. So that all sounds great. I guess my last thing I'll say before council members, y'all want to proceed, is we really don't want to wait until 2024 to deal with the signs. Like, we've had this new logo for, since 2015-ish. Like, that's almost 10 years. And so, like, I'll bring it up again when we have this next discussion. I just wanted to call. Okay. All right. So thumbs up, thumbs down on the streetscapes refresh as is. Yep. Okay, cool. We've got full consensus on that one too. Thank you all for moving through that. We did it.
Thank you.
All right, I have one last section for you. Again, this one's just a budget preview, so you don't have to make any decisions yet. So these are items based on council feedback we've received, based on the assessment that Doug and Rob have been working on, of things we don't currently have in our 5-year CIP that we anticipate bringing forward to you for 2023 or beyond. They're not all happening at once, most likely. One is park amenities. So they've been going through and providing a score for every single trash can, bench, picnic table throughout the city. When you look at those scores, to replace the ones, which are the worst condition, 5 being the best condition or brand new, would be about $200,000. So there's a lot of pieces of equipment. It goes quickly. To replace all the 2s is about $450,000. So if we were looking at doing just the 1s and 2s in 2023, we'd be looking at about $650,000, with between $150,000 and $200,000 in out years to be able to get through that list, all the way 100% of that equipment in that first 5-year period. And then probably looking at about $100,000 a year to do an ongoing replacement program that would allow for replacement every 10 to 15 years of each of those pieces of equipment. The other piece of that recommendation will likely be to bring forward a new bench and picnic table and trash can model. So right now we use an expanded metal that has a plastic coating on it. What we're finding is, even though it's a less expensive option, it's getting damaged. And so as we've dealt with increases in vandalism, we're finding that those benches and trash cans, picnic tables are getting impacted much more quickly than they may have been in the past. If you look at some of the benches at places like Croak Reservoir, where they did use a custom powder coated bench instead of the plastic coat, those benches are 15, 16 years old and still in really great shape. So even though there may be some carving into them or there may have been tagging, that powder coated metal is easier to be able to buff out and repair than the plastic coated benches. So more to come on that, but just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a preview of what you'll see. Some other projects we're looking at are pavilion replacement at Danahay Park and at Al Thomas Park. I think everybody's been in particularly the Danahay Pavilion, which looks very different than those throughout the city. So that, just based on age, is ready for replacement with something similar to what we have at A.B. Rains. Ball fields, about $100,000 for new backstops at Mallory Park and Rotary Park. I'm not even sure I have an age on those. They are in the 20-plus-year-old range for those chain link backstops. And then some drainage at J.C. Ball Field. Parking lot at Northwest Open Space, we did choose to use a soft surface lot because there wasn't enough funding to do an asphalt lot when we expanded that in phase 1 of the Northwest Open Space project. If desired, we could move forward with an asphalt lot either as a standalone project or as a part of phases 2 and 3 when we're ready to move forward with those out at Northwest Open Space. Skate park maintenance at about $75,000. The skate park was installed in about 2008, and we have been lucky. We haven't had to do a ton of maintenance to the actual hardscape, but as that concrete continues to age, we want to make sure we're patching it. Even little thin cracks with skateboard wheels can make a big difference, so we want to make sure we're catching those before they get any larger. The rebar that's in the skate park, the structure underneath, is really designed so those cracks don't split apart anymore, but it doesn't keep the concrete from chipping away once the cracks form. One of the biggest portions of that $75,000 is replacing the pool coping around the bowl. And again, just based on age and use, which we're glad it's getting enough use to wear it down, but at the same time, that does mean we have to replace it based on that use. And then the last project on this list is Windburn Ponds at $10,000 to replace the aeration system that we use to maintain water quality, and that helps control everything from algae to maintaining a healthy fish environment. So with that, any questions on that preview list?
Councilmember, it's not a question, but I have had people talk to me about the skate park. I'm really glad to see that on there.
Any other questions, comments from council members? Go ahead, Councilmember.
Where is Windburn Ponds?
Right off of Huron, just to the north of the Vantage Point High School.
Oh,
Any other questions, comments? All right, Amanda, thank you very much.
I think we made it. And
We
I think,
made it.
unless you have any additional ideas or feedback, I think we have covered everything.
I think I just have a quick question, and you can just remind me because it's not on the top of my mind, when are we scheduled to redo the playground pad and playground equipment at EB Range?
It is, we already went out to bid. We're waiting for some revisions from the bidder, and then we'll be bringing forward a contract to you here shortly.
Excellent, perfect. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
All right, council, anything else for the good of the order we need to discuss?
Move to adjourn.
All right, we are adjourned.